Hey, Bitcoin wealth builders. Welcome to episode 96 of Bitcoin Hard Talk. So we took a little break from the usual format last week because it was getting absolute carnage across England and there were mass shootings in the US. And I wanted to pull it all together to help you understand the operations ahead so that we can track them in real time. And September the 13th is the operation that is being engineered for civil unrest in the UK. If you didn't get an opportunity to watch last week's episode, please go back to it. It is really important that you understand what is happening so that you can prepare and get ahead. Now we're back to the usual format today, and we're going to be discussing the brand new Shanghai Proof-of-Weapons Network that was launched really to be what I consider America's turning point. I think this is going to be a real turning point, and the media really tried to underplay it and make sure that no one in the Western media was aware of what was happening. But don't worry, we got you covered. We're going to be covering everything that you need to know about it. And it was unveiled at the SEO meeting. If you haven't heard of the SEO meeting, that is by design. You're not meant to have heard of it. But we're going to make sure on Bitcoin Hard Talk you're aware of it, because now that we have more than one proof of weapons network, we needed to understand the rules, because the rules of the China proof of weapons network is very different to the privately controlled proof of weapons network in the US. We're going to be diving into all of that. So we're going to be doing it in three parts as usual. We're going to be doing this week in Bitcoin, this week in macro, and this week in geopolitics. If you're new to the show and we have not met already, we've got over 101,000 subscribers now, and we're trying to get to 102,000. So please hit the subscribe button, hit the bell symbol, hit all. I want to prepare you for a world of Bitcoin, AI, and central bank digital currencies. I spent the last 25 years of my life obsessing over the topic of investing and money, and 14 years as an early investor in Bitcoin at $3. Wrote the first published book in the world to include Bitcoin, and invested in over 100 companies in the sector, as well as speaking at the first Bitcoin conference in Prague. But Bitcoin is way more than just Bitcoin. It is a resistance, and it is the ability to protect yourself and boycott the proof of weapons network. So this week in Bitcoin, what are we going to be going on? This was actually a popular request. So on top of everything that happened this week in Bitcoin, I'm going to be covering the Bitcoin core versus the knots. I guess you could call it a civil war. It's a bit of a geeky topic, but I've had lots of requests to cover this because if you were not a part of the Bitcoin block size war that culminated in the 2017 hard fork, then you may be new to this. I'll give you my opinion on what's happening, as well as everything that happened this week in Bitcoin. In part two, we'll be covering this week in macro. And the main topic is going to be how the new Shanghai Proof of Weapons Network threatens dollar domination at the moment. And it won't be done with the BRICS currency, spoiler alert, but it will be done with a Proof of Weapons Network. So we'll be covering that. And in part three, this week in geopolitics, we'll be covering and analyzing the shocking, disgusting, makes you want to puke, leaked Tony Blair and a Trump plan of how they want to rebuild Gaza. And remember what I said. I said what happens in Gaza is a beta for what they want to do in UK after a civil unrest campaign, so they can roll it out over the European Union and bring it to America. And civil unrest, mass deportations, border control, border and open policies was the strategy to get here. So we'll be giving an update on all of that. So let's jump straight into this week in Bitcoin part one, where I'll be covering the Bitcoin core versus the Bitcoin not civil war and everything that happened this week in Bitcoin. So a rolling theme is that I've been telling people not to buy these public company Bitcoins. Now, if you have an investment portfolio and you've already got a ton of Bitcoin and you want to mess around, or you've got funds locked in your pension and you want to do some trading, maybe it's self-invested, then there's reasons why you might want to do that. But for the vast majority of people, there is no point using the stock market to get access to Bitcoin and putting Wall Street in between you and some key person risk between you and your Bitcoin. But now because so many people are investing in these public companies, and the Wall Street is in the securitization and financialization game, these Bitcoin public companies now own 1 million Bitcoin. So they are approaching across all the public companies the amount of Bitcoin that is held by Satoshi. So just to give you context, that is 1 out of every 20 Bitcoin that will ever exist is currently held in one of these Bitcoin treasury companies. And if you've watched any of my previous episodes, you will know that they are engineering a complex that will lead to a bunch of Chapter 11s, acquisition strategies, and potentially you ending up in a 2-year cycle of holding Bitcoin, having your Bitcoin sold, locking in at the dollar value, and all the things that happen at those big bankruptcy processes. Please avoid that, because I know those that get caught in them, you probably end up knocking on my door, because I had a lot of experience from this. I speak from experience of having spent 2 years of my life supporting 650,000 creditors, because I ended up making the stupid mistake of borrowing against a very small percentage, thankfully, but borrowing against some of my Bitcoin because I didn't want to sell it. And I got caught in one of these Chapter 11 processes. So anyway, 1 million Bitcoin locked up in these Bitcoin public companies now. One of those public companies is a French semiconductor chip manufacturing firm. The company is called Sequans, Sequans, and they're raising $200 million to buy Bitcoin on its treasury. I find that pretty interesting, because obviously Bitcoin mining requires these semiconductor chips, and it is also the integration with the artificial intelligence play. Now, I don't know anything about this company. I haven't looked at it, but I just want to give you the headlines of what's happening. Another one of those, Nakamoto, which was founded by David Bailey, in conjunction with some deep state actors at the Proof-of-Weapons Network, that works with Cantor Fitzgerald and these financial terrorists that construct these financial weapons of mass destruction. They announced that they're going to be doing a $5 billion equity offering to buy more Bitcoin. And they're also saying that they might be investing in Bitcoin companies. So now it's become a Bitcoin and a Bitcoin VC firm. Funnily enough, a long time ago, I created one called Bitcoin Capital. It wasn't a public company, but we were investing in many of the companies that made Bitcoin exchanges and various things at the time. But now it looks like they're diversifying into Bitcoin companies. But what did I say? The stock is down 82% from its peak, and it was 23% on the announcement of the fundraise that happened either last week or this week, because we took the week off. So, these are wild things that you put on top of Bitcoin that now introduces key person risk, and now you're betting on whether they're going to deliver upon their promise, the volatility of the stock market, and everything in between. I'm just going to take a quick sip of coffee. Do me a favor, hit the like button and retweet button. I want to keep my energy up because we've got a lot to cover. Okay, so we are entering into a two-tier Bitcoin world. It is going to be Bitcoin that Wall Street controls, either through treasury companies, either through custody and loans against Bitcoin, or either through a Bitcoin ETF or whatever types of Bitcoin-backed bonds and other exotic structured products that they come up with. And that is all through the public markets, the debt capital markets, the OTC markets, the structured markets, the fund management markets, the buy side, the sell side, the ETFs, the custodians. They want to come between you and your Bitcoin. And Bitcoin is too simple. There's only ever going to be 21 million of them. You can have money you can own, money you can spend, and money that has a fixed supply. So they don't want you to have that. They want to make it more complicated. And many people are going to be doing that. So there's going to be this two-tiered Bitcoin system. On the other side is where I want my BitcoinHardTalk members to be, which is sovereign Bitcoin, Bitcoin that makes you more sovereign. It's your own self-custody, money that you own, money that you can spend, and money that also has that fixed supply number go up technology, because there's only so many Bitcoin. This is what makes you immune from the banksters. This is what makes you boycott the Federal Reserve, because you got money outside their system. This is what helps you not be subjected to giving BlackRock more power by giving them your Bitcoin to them so that they can manage, so that then you don't have to borrow against it and end up creating mining some fiat currency in a debt-based Ponzi scheme because you're using your Bitcoin as collateral. And this way you get to direct the flow of your Bitcoin in a circular economy so that when that inevitable proof-of-weapons network next Black Swan event comes, you're not stuck begging the bank for your Bitcoin and they say the door is closed. So it's only the second tier that keeps the sovereign nature of Bitcoin, and you get to boycott the war machine as well. This is how we make a difference. I want a community of people outside that system, because all the other banksters, they couldn't beat us, so they joined us. And now they're seeing how much Bitcoin they can accumulate within their control. And they'll be using this as a negotiating chip in this multipolar world. We'll be covering more of that in part 2 as well. But speaking of the banksters, the financial terrorists, what about the one in 2008, the global financial crisis, that was an investment bank that decided to reclassify itself as a retail bank just so it could access some of those bailout money, the money that the taxpayers paid, that rolled over the debt-based Ponzi scheme that you're still paying for today in inflation. You know, the socializing of the losses, the American socialism for the large corrupt corporations through crony capitalism, while everybody else is a debt slave to those that are creating these financial products, the large corporations that are socialized as well. Well, Goldman Sachs, you know, that one, the one that BlackRock used their technology and guided the Federal Reserve in order to decide which companies to bail out. Goldman Sachs was one of them. And what did they do with your money? Well, they fueled a debt-based Ponzi scheme that created this K-shaped economy and wealth inequality. And now they've got, and they announced and they disclosed $470 million worth of Bitcoin exposure, most likely via the Bitcoin ETF through the company bailout that gave them the technology through Aladdin AI in order to be in a position to survive today when the thing should have been drained. It should have gone to the deathbed. It should have disappeared long time ago. But they created this too big to fail debt-based Ponzi scheme, proof-of-weapons network that created financial weapons and mass destruction that is being weaponized upon the world right now. And so in combat of that, in the fiat currency world, from Bitcoin, the Bitcoin token was created, a stable coin, a Tether. And it originally launched on Bitcoin on the Omni network. It then went over to Ethereum, and it's got multiple chains now. But Tether announced that they're going to be launching, again, going back to their roots, Tether USDT on the Bitcoin blockchain, but this time through more advanced technology. They call it RGB technology. Essentially, users are going to be able to hold and transfer digital representations of the dollar alongside their Bitcoin in the same wallet. And so this allows you to really have some of the, and apparently it's going to have additional layers of privacy. I haven't dug deep into the technology and it hasn't launched yet, so I'll make sure I'm on top of that. But in the confines of fiat currency, where you have fiat currency for your spending money because you don't want to take currency risk, Bitcoin for your savings, and then if you want to outperform Bitcoin, you have your investments, which you risk manage. Now you can have your stable coins, which will allow you to spend dollars without currency risk if your goods are priced in dollars. And you can have additional private transactions on Tether, apparently. Obviously, that will be in the confines of a centralized company where wallet address can be sanctioned and various other things. But still, it is a full reserve Tether within the confines of the fiat currency debt-based Ponzi scheme, backed by the debt of the US government, but an easy off-ramps for you to get into Bitcoin. And when there is penetration of QR code-based payment systems, which looks like the direction that we're going with all these CBDCs and digital IDs that are coming out, it will make you trivial to be able to offload some of your Bitcoin when you need to spend it while you keep it locked up in self-custody. So all of this is coming as well. So that you can, and apparently it's going to be done where you can send and receive value offline as well. So if you're doing it in self-custody, and you can even verify your own transactions if you're running a node. Now, you don't have to do all of this. This is a journey you get to. We can share this journey together in Bitcoin Hard Talk. I've got plenty of resources to help you get there. But initially, your job is to get off zero Bitcoin if you're not there already, and then go through this step and ladder process. Don't forget that I've got lots of resources and can help you get through that, completely free resources, because I want as many people in this community while we transition to this world of Bitcoin AI, central bank digital currencies, and stablecoins. Now, US banks are essentially lobbying to block certain aspects of stablecoins, because one thing that comes with programmable money, like a stablecoin, is the ability to pay yield directly on that stablecoin. So you have a digital dollar that exists outside the system, but is backed through a centralized issuer. So it's not Bitcoin, but it could actually programmatically pay you yield, because when the US government because every stable coin is backed by dollars, you don't hold it at a bank, they buy treasuries. And so when the US government pays yield on their debt-based Ponzi scheme, Tether, the issuer, would receive yield, and they end up buying Bitcoin or building out Bitcoin mining companies. And that made them more profitable than Citibank and BlackRock as well, not combined, but individually. And now, if you can take your money out of the bank as a stable coin, it's fully reserved, and it pays yield, and that yield could be auto-converted into Bitcoin, they definitely don't want you to do that. So they have been lobbying so that that does not happen. They only want to pay yield if you have a banking license, so that they can do it with their Federal Reserve, which they put in the Genius Act. And so, if this were to happen, this would create trillions of dollars of deposit outflows, because why would you hold your money at a bank when you can have full reserve that pays yield on chain, and you can self-custody it, and you can spend it with QR code penetration? So the banks are holding on to their monopoly in the financial industrial complex, because that is where all their power comes from. When they created the central banking system, JP Morgan's, Warburg's, the Rockefellers, the proxies for the Rothschild families, and the various other families in that creature from Jekyll Island that they created. They engineered a way of stealing the dollar for the benefit of the American people through the previous state banking system, just like they did in UK via the Bank of England. And so they want to make sure that they get that. They don't want you to be able to benefit from that, even though they're not needed, and they use regulatory capture, which is why we end up fighting back with Bitcoin as well. Let's take a little bit of a look around the globe. There was an announcement from Thailand, and Thailand is considering some Bitcoin reserves. There was a similar announcement from Japan as well, that they'll be considering building Bitcoin strategic reserves. At the moment, we've only had Bitcoin strategic reserves through confiscation, through financial terrorists on the Proof-of-Weapons Network, like the UK, like the US, like China, and like Ukraine. But there are people that have actually bought them. So one of the countries is the Kingdom of Bhutan, that wants to build more sovereign by Bitcoin nations, and it's even mining them in order to build hydropower in order to mine those Bitcoin. And they even changed their GDP to a gross happiness index, so that they don't start creating these K-shaped economies, and they're fighting back with Bitcoin. That's how you know someone that really cares about their people. And obviously El Salvador has been buying them, but the IMF financial economic hitmen have been trying to stop them. There's a bit of controversy around what's going there. Japan was really early. They hosted Mt. Gox, one of the first exchange. It went down in 2014, created by Mark Capellas, who bought an exchange that was missing 80,000 Bitcoin from the creator of Ripple, XRP, Jeb McCaleb. He bought this Ponzi scheme and then ended up losing 90% of the value of everyone's Bitcoin in a 14-year bankruptcy. But anyway, Japan was the host there. Obviously, Satoshi Nakamoto, the name comes from Japan. They were one of the largest communities in the early days, and they were taking Bitcoin payment adoption way ahead of most. They even got into creating a digital CBDC, digital Japanese yen, And obviously, they're the host of the Japanese carry trade, which is completely vassalized into the US dollar proof-of-weapons network, creating a debt-based casino for hedge funds and fund managers that they're actually fighting back right now, and they're stopping giving Wall Street all this free money so they can buy US stocks, and they're actually allowing some inflation to roll out in the macro side. We'll be covering a bit more about that. But anyway, Japan is looking at building some Bitcoin strategic reserves. We'll see if that happens. And also, we got confirmation that United Arab Emirates, UAE, has been and is confirmed that they've mined their first 6,000 odd Bitcoin through their Bitcoin mining operation. Now, I think, and I have it on good sources from various contacts, that many of the countries in the Middle East have been building their Bitcoin reserves in there, it's a no-brainer for those in the Middle East. But now we got confirmation that the UAE has joined the Bitcoin mining race at the sovereign level as well. So all Bitcoins were mined via something called Citadel mining. And Citadel mining is essentially controlled by what do they call it? The state conglomerate international holding. Okay, well, anyway, their state company is called IHC. And 61% of that is owned by the UAE Royal Group under MBZ, basically. And that's the Abu Dhabi royal family in UAE. They started building out the farm and launching it in 2022. Citadel Mining basically constructed a mining rig via the in the country's capital, and it was done in partnership with Phoenix Group, which I believe is a public company. They did an IPO as well. And so this was all confirmed via satellite. So they saw the mining farm, they detected it via satellite, and now we got that confirmation. So that really, I think UAE has got a lot more. I reckon they've done a lot more OTC trades. But just based upon the disclosed Bitcoin, this will rank the UAE as the sixth largest country in terms of Bitcoin reserves. This is surpassing El Salvador, which holds approximately 6,246 Bitcoin. And speaking of El Salvador, there was a bit of trolling from President Bukele. He came out and while he's been buying a bunch of gold, he's now got more gold than Bitcoin in El Salvador. El Salvador's President Bukele, he came out on Twitter and he quoted basically a market on Twitter when it was basically talking about where they're going to be betting on when El Salvador's Bitcoin holdings will be worth 1 billion or more. So you see all these different types of betting markets. People were making a market saying, will by the end of year, El Salvador's Bitcoin strategic reserves be worth 1 billion? And his response was, quote, I could do the funniest thing right now. Basically suggesting that more potential Bitcoin purchases would be coming in order to push the result of that prediction market and that betting market as well. And so basically since then, the odds of El Salvador's Bitcoin holdings hitting $1 billion in 2025, based upon that, surged by approximately 41%, which is more indication of these crazy markets. Now, I don't encourage anyone to be involved in speculating. There is far too easy for everybody to just stack sats every week, own more Bitcoin this month than the previous month, spend less than you earn, save the difference in Bitcoin. It's a simple strategy. Get on with your life. Go out there and mine as much fiat currency as you can through your work, through your contracts, through your business, whatever you can, and then save them in Bitcoin. And the lower the fiat value, the more Bitcoin you get each month, which means you look forward to crashes while everyone else is crying as well. And so that's the way to do it. Right. I'm going to take another sip of coffee before it gets cold. Do me a favor, hit the like button, hit the comments, share, retweet, do what you need to do. We need to get this out to as many people to protect themselves in a world of Bitcoin AI and central bank digital currencies. Sorry if that sounds very noisy on the mic. I'm sure it's a very nice, fresh bean to cup coffee. What is everyone else drinking? Let me know in the comments section what you're having as well. So we had an announcement from, I'm no friend of U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, the neighbor of Jeffrey Epstein, the dual citizen Israeli financial terrorist that is building, and I believe, an important part of constructing these financial weapons of mass destruction so people can borrow against their Bitcoin, that has a very questionable background that we cover in the geopolitical side. But in the Trump administration, he announced that the US will be issuing their economic data on blockchain. And it will be beginning with the American gross domestic product data. So this brings up a whole bunch of questions. When you say blockchain, what do you mean? Do you mean the only immutable proof of work blockchain, Bitcoin? Or do you mean that you're going to be doing it via some kind of Ethereum layer 2 chain link type of thing, which is more built for those types of things? It will be interesting to see. My guess is that they go further down the shitcoin casino in using something like Chainlink in order to put that data as an oracle into the blockchain. And we have seen a lot of, it's a gimmick in a sense, because it's, human validation of an immutable record. You put that in the blockchain. Okay, awesome. But it brings up an interesting conversation. And this is the main topic that I wanted to cover in This Week in Bitcoin, around an ongoing debate that we've been having for a long time. And a fix was done really early in Bitcoin's life cycle when it released the code that kind of put some parameters on what you could put in the Bitcoin blockchain. Because the way that Bitcoin blockchain works is it's mined by miners, and we have this decentralized network where everyone that can run a node, which means you can verify your own transactions. You're not dependent upon anyone to verify your transactions. But in exchange, you have to host an entire copy of the Bitcoin blockchain. And I don't want to go too geeky into the tech because I wanted to make this accessible so that people can understand. But one of the debates has always been, should we constrict how much data can be put in a block because it makes it more expensive to run those nodes? And at the moment, it's very trivial. Anyone can run a node. You can buy a very cheap equipment, Raspberry Pi, and you can run some software, and you can be fully sovereign and verify your own transactions. And you can be one of those people that backs up the Bitcoin blockchain, which is what makes it decentralized. Not everyone has to do that. But I encourage people to get down further that journey as we go to this world of Bitcoin AI and CBDCs. But there's always been a debate around, should we let people put more and more data in the Bitcoin blockchain? Is that considered spam? And so this was an early debate, and right back during, right after the Satoshi times, the developers that were known as Bitcoin Core, and we've always had different types of implementations. So Bitcoin is open source software. Anyone can suggest a change, and anyone can code up in the open source GitHub repo. But there's a bit of politics around those that have commit access. And obviously there's an element of hierarchy around who's considered more important. And then also there is a structure for implementing code in a responsible way. And so there's always been a constant struggle between the core developers and alternative implementations. But it's really important to have alternative implementations. And so one of the core developers, Luke Dash Jr., and I recently had a call with Bitcoin Mechanic, who's been really pushing this latest round. We have these open source, open debates, and that's how Bitcoin works. We all debate in public. It can look very, very chaotic, but that's the nature of this decentralized network. But an alternative implementation that people can run on their nodes is called Knots. And Knots got about 17%, which is the most competing to Bitcoin Core I think we've ever had. And this has created a bit of a civil war. One of the core developers, Luke Dash Jr., created this implementation. And so I think this is very healthy personally. But some people have been calling it the spam war. And so we had the block size war. This is the spam war. So there's been this spam debate. Some will call it the spam wars, or the Bitcoin core versus not civil war. It hasn't got an official name yet, but I just wanted to give you my current understanding of it, so that you can decide whether you want to engage in the debate as well as part of being a Bitcoiner. So the current state, anyway, as it currently stands, is that Bitcoin has filters. And all this debate happens across X. It's more decentralized, or in the GitHub repos if you're a bit geeky. Basically, nodes block very large data. And it's, if there's big data payloads, at the moment, anything less than 100 kilobytes, if you had, for example, an image that you wanted to put in the Bitcoin blockchain, you can do that, and you can create an immutable record. So Howard Lutnick is saying they want to put GDP data. But what if you want to put something a bit larger? Well, we've had updates to the Bitcoin code that allow for that. But anything less than 100, megabyte images, they basically you can insert them into the chain, and you can have it in a readable format. And so if you're running a node, then you could, if you're geeky enough, you can have these images that you're backing up for everybody in the immutable Bitcoin blockchain. And you can put them in readable format if they're less than 100 kilobytes, which is not much data as well. And so what happened is a couple of miners that were mining Bitcoin, and they had some software. One of them is Marathon Digital. It's a publicly traded miner in the US. They have some software called Slipstream, which is basically a Bitcoin transaction replay service that they created, and I believe other people can use it as well. And Marathon Digital won't allow any illicit images to be contained in their, because they don't want some kind of backdoor where people could slip in an image. And what if that image is something illegal? What if it's something, that they really don't want to be associated with? And so because it's readable, then it creates an interesting legal challenge. And so this really sparked off this whole debate as well. And so if you're a public company, obviously you have a risk management team. And as a public company, you're held to a whole governance network. And so as that type of company, you have more business and moral risk. And if, someone wanted to do an attack on the company, they could say that they're storing, you can imagine, I won't use the word because it will probably get me banned, but some disgusting Jeffrey Epstein type of pictures that could be put into the blockchain. And then they're storing them on their node, and then you could have an attack on the company. And so bad actors are essentially left with, dropping data into fragments of, greater than 80 bytes. So people could take the photo, the image, and they can break it up into pieces. And this makes it where you can't really, it's very convoluted in order to reconstruct the document. And so the result is that basically, because you need to break up these images in order to put them in the blockchain, the chain remains like mostly clean because you don't know what's going on. You haven't got them on your node. You've just got pieces or shards or fragments of it, which are very, very hard to retrieve as well. And so if there was any, hidden illicit content, you've kind of got plausible deniability because it requires some real specialist type of software to locate, and only the most sophisticated would be able to do that. And node runners, basically anyone that's running a node, can retain plausible deniability, and they're essentially relatively safe from any legal crackdowns. There is also probably ideological reasons. People just want Bitcoin to be money. If you want to play around with putting data and JPEGs and images, then look at some of the alternative blockchains that were kind of made for that. And so, that's the current state of it. Now, what the proposal is by Bitcoin Core, which they want to put through, is having no filter or basically having a very significantly larger filter, many magnitudes larger as well. And so imagine a hypothetical situation where there was no filter at all. Basically, anyone could eject, very, very large images that are greater than this 80 megabytes, and they can directly have people store these on their nodes. And so nodes, in theory, are basically going to be downloading all of these reconstructed different types of images. They could have illicit data on their node. There's nothing that they want to be involved with. And so one could argue, in a world where there are intelligence operations to try and deliberately attack the network or attack individual people, there might be an intelligence operation that means that they don't have plausible deniability for on their node for the image that they've got there. And so this is an attack on the network. And the way that Bitcoin is designed is it is designed to always have attack on networks, and we just get better and better and better. It's called an anti-fragile network as well. So hosting Bitcoin could basically become akin to, just having toxic digital waste with all of these crazy things, and there would be unlimited demand. And so some people are speculating that there are various people in the core development team. Now, they're not proposing unlimited, but they are proposing to significantly increase it as well. And the argument is that this creates a legal and reputational risk that could push many node runners to stop running nodes. And some people are speculating, well, is this an actual attack on the network? Now, if you were trying to attack the network, wouldn't you try and get control over the core team, the core developers, and try and see if you can attack that way? And so, that's the argument. You can pick what you want. Others, then they're saying that we'd like Bitcoin to be more than money. We'd like to be able to do these different types of NFTs and pictures and everything as well. But from my perspective, I think core is playing with fire. And I'm skeptical about that as well. And the right way to be in Bitcoin is to always be skeptical, because people can be compromised. And this is not an attack on someone's ethics or morals. People can be ransomed. People can be paid off. And so when I see things like, these types of shifts from changes of previous debates, this is I think there's a risk to this that doesn't really need to be taken. We can push everything else out to the alternative chains that want to play with these things. But I think it reduces the incentives for people to run these nodes if such a risk exists. Now, this may be very paranoid, but also, I'm not sure that this is, a risk worth taking. It's basically a theoretical, there could be a theoretical sharp drop in the decentralization, because the number of people that want to participate in running these nodes may theoretically have dropped, and this is what the block war debate was all about. It was maintaining, more expensive fees by keeping the block small so that more people could run nodes. And so it looks like the battle is returning. So even if only economic nodes matter, operators like individuals and teams and businesses, they basically could face some direct legal liability. And I'm not sure that we should do that. And so, many might decide that it's just not worth taking a risk. And I don't think it's a good thing to reduce the number of people that are going to be running nodes. And this is less, less decentralizing and more centralizing as a paranoid risk. Now, I don't think this is a major deal, but I just wanted to give my opinion on this. This is really also the maintaining of the ideological fight and an extension of what Bitcoin is and the previous block size war as well. And so people could say what their intention is, but maybe there's a covert operation. And I think we should always treat it that way. And that is the whole point of Bitcoin. Don't trust, verify. And so I see no problem of having these competing teams And in my nodes, I think it's a good thing to run knots. Now, if you're not a node runner, you don't have to be involved in these things. But this one is really being called the spam wars, the node wars, or the core civil war between competing implementations of Bitcoin core code. And I think that's a good thing. I think that's very healthy. And so I've always wanted competing implementations between core, and now we have reputable competing implementations between core and not. So that it just means that it keeps one of the dev teams more honest if there is genuine competition with a competing dev team, and it keeps it more resilient. And so I think this is a really healthy thing. I think it's really good. And if one of the development teams, goes rogue, gets blackmailed, gets compromised, gets Mossaded, gets Epsteined, gets BlackRocked, gets axed, gets block streamed, and all of these different questions and conspiracy theories have, kind of gone through all the time, we've got alternatives. And I'm very skeptical about some of the behavior of some of the people and core developers. I'm speaking to you, Peter Todd. I've seen your support for nuclear warfare and Zionism, and all of the crazy things. And we also know that you don't even have, according to you, any Bitcoin. And so I'm a little bit skeptical about that. Now, it is a decentralized network. We don't get to choose. And Adam Back, a legend. He's always been he was named in the Satoshi white paper, part of the original cypherpunk movement. But when I see him pushing Bitcoin treasury companies and fiat currency financial weapons of mass destruction, and really pushing these different types of stablecoin implementations and treasury stocks, I'm not sure. And it's the whole point of this. Is he really cypherpunk? Does a cypherpunk push people into Bitcoin treasury companies over Bitcoin? Am I overreacting to that? Well, but the whole point here is that we need competing implementations, because that's how Bitcoin has always worked. Don't trust, verify, and treat everything with suspicion. And so everybody can be compromised. And so that's an important thing to remember. So that's my take on the whole thing. I will be running knots on my node. I think it's good for this type of competition. It's a healthy debate, but please don't confuse this as thinking that, this is chaos, because there were so many people during the block war debate that got out of Bitcoin because they just thought it was carnage as well. And so that's what I want you to remember. But also remember, just a reality check here. You can engage in the debate, but you're only really in the game if you run your own node. And so eventually I want to make sure that I got some resources to help people do that. And that is where the sovereign power of Bitcoin actually comes in. It's when you hold it in self-custody. And so I just want to remind you, on simondixon.com, if you're not a member of the completely free BitcoinHardTalk membership portal, head over to my blog, and you can put custody in there. And there's a blog post where I go through a guide of how to self-custody. And if you want to do a completely free course so that we can unwrap a hardware wallet, teach you how to do that, the things you need to consider, backing up your phrase and everything. I got Andreas Antonopoulos, who wrote the book Mastering Bitcoin, in order to create an 8-module course for everybody, completely free. It's my gift to you. And it goes through some of the security considerations. And so making sure you can get that. And I think I'm going to do a guide in the future as well on how to connect it with a node, so that if you really want to go deep down, being able to verify your own transactions. Remember, these are optional things that I'd like you to get to, but don't stop that from you buying Bitcoin in the first place, because it's quite geeky. But I just want to remind you that head over to the Bitcoin Hard Talk membership portal. And if you create a login over there, I'll add you to my newsletter, make sure that we're building out this community. And there's a course there that you can have free of charge on how to self-custody your Bitcoin as well. Right, let's carry on with the stories, the final stories of this week in Bitcoin before we move over to part 2, this week in macro. There was a story around a single whale Bitcoiner that sent over approximately 310 million Bitcoin and did it in a really weird way. He essentially created a flash crash. He went right over to the exchange. Now, when you're selling that much Bitcoin, because there are so many buyers out there, you normally, if you're that high net worth, you go to an over-the-counter broker. But for some reason, he wanted to manipulate the price. And the interesting thing is that whatever his game was, maybe he had some short derivatives and financial weapons of mass destruction. It was a hedge fund player. It was a Wall Street player. We get to see the short-term games. Now, I've always said short-term Bitcoin price is completely manipulated. Long-term, it can't be because of his fixed supply. But essentially, in a very short period of time, he was dumping approximately 24,000 Bitcoin, and the entity was still holding about 152,874 Bitcoin across some linked wallets, and then sent another 24K Bitcoin as well. So all of them were sold on the exchange, and it really didn't have much impact on price. You know, the peak high price of Bitcoin is about 123,000, and we're playing around 110,000. So somebody can now sell 24,000 Bitcoin in chunks. We had the 80,000 Bitcoin as well. So we're getting a real mass redistribution. Now, what is interesting about these is people like, you know, that may have got in early, like myself, but I still buy every month. You know, some people are redistributing to people that are buying at this cost base. And so the people that are buying at this cost base are looking to get through the next cycle or the next few cycles. So this is redistributing Bitcoin from early to this new cost base, which is how you get to the next level of market capitalization. And when you have these big whales selling, there is unbelievable liquidity. Like a book can just suck it up, 24,000 Bitcoin like that. That's a lot of buyers. You know, there were rumors as well that this was some kind of institutional pump and dump campaign around Ethereum. Now, I'm not sure how that worked because the Bitcoin blockchain and the Ethereum blockchain, I'm not sure how you connect those wallets. But online, people were making that connection. And so they were pump buying Ethereum with some of their Bitcoin at the same time as Ethereum treasury companies being launched. And Tom Lee, a Wall Street player and a fund manager, was basically pumping ETH like crazy at the very same time. And so some people were speculating it's to try and get back to Bitcoin after this short-term pump in Ethereum. We're not sure if it's long-term. We're not sure how the ETH treasury companies are going to be performing. But, you know, this is what happens when you become a trader. And speaking of trading, one of those OTC brokers, the investment bank in the Bitcoin space, is a company called Galaxy Digital. It used to be a public company in Canada. It's now on NASDAQ as well. And they're also diversifying some of their stock into tokenized stock built on the Solana blockchain. And so they're looking at these different types of tokenized stocks. And this is obviously BlackRock's vision, this whole tokenized utopia. In part 3, in the geopolitical section, I'm going to be explaining how they're using such tokenization in the Gaza genocide at the moment. And I'll make you understand that so you can see what they're doing there because they want to do it here. And obviously BlackRock is primarily, I call them the CEO of the Proof-of-Weapons Network because they're managing the largest amount of assets under administration. And so we're now getting different types of companies you know, that are going public and tokenizing those stocks as well. This is all part of the securitization, financialization, and tokenization of Wall Street, trying to get you to own your Bitcoin with them and get you to own a Bitcoin derivative rather than Bitcoin. And that's what I'm talking about with this two-tier system. And it doesn't, you know, it's because Bitcoin is proof of work, it doesn't matter who owns it. But the more people that own it in self-custody, the more sovereign people there are. And these are the people that I want in my community as well. Speaking of the banksters as well, the regulator of commodities in the US, the Commodities and Futures Trading Commission, CFTC, it granted the prediction market, which is another form of saying gambling market using crypto. It gave it an actual approval to operate its crypto prediction market in the United States. And so it's creeping into a more gambling environment within America using the CFTC as the regulator. So that was another story that came out. And speaking of those that were engaged in Operation Choke Point 2.0, that led to the approval of the BlackRock ETF, that led to Wall Street financializing securitization, and tokenization types of projects, the Federal Reserve is now going to be holding a payment innovation conference on October the 21st, where it will be discussing Bitcoin, crypto, stablecoins, and artificial intelligence. So that's everything I've got for you. The debate between Bitcoin Core and NOTs, my perspective on it, how we protect ourselves from any types of attacks on the development side, the progress that we've made, and how the fiat currency proof-of-weapons network is doing more and more and more to make sure you own your Bitcoin with them rather than you holding your own Bitcoin in self-custody, plus a guide that you can get for free if you want to self-custody. So that's everything I've got for you in part one, this week in Bitcoin. We're now going to move over to part two, this week in macro. Just before I do that, do me a favor. I'm going to finish off my coffee, and it's a little bit cold right now. So let's take a moment, and please do a few things. If everyone that's watching this, subscribe to my channel in YouTube, hit the bell symbol, hit all. YouTube will notify you every time I go live. And I would actually get to the goal of having more and more people that are going to be protected in this world of Bitcoin, AI, and CBDCs. I'm really grateful to everybody that got me over 100,000 subscribers. The YouTube team sent me my silver placard, but eventually we want to get to gold. So our next goal is to get to 210,000 subscribers in commemoration of Bitcoin's 21 million Bitcoin. So hit that subscribe button, hit the bell symbol, hit all, so we can protect more people. Things are moving faster and faster and faster. And I'm not stopping until as many people are protected. And sadly, it's going to be a small minority, but I need you to protect your loved ones in this world of AI, Bitcoin, CBDCs, and stablecoins that we are rapidly transitioning to. Now, if YouTube takes me out, follow me on Rumble. Rumble is going to be doing a Lightning Bitcoin integration. It received funding from Tether as well. If we get wiped out on YouTube, we go live over there. I got a small following there. We need everybody that subscribes to me on YouTube to go over to Rumble, put Simon Dixon in, and follow me over there. I got under 1,000. We need to get that close to the 100,000 mark because YouTube could take us down at any time. We're also looking at another couple of, if you prefer downloading and listening in your car without an internet connection, or your gym, or wherever you go to Bitcoin Hard Talk podcast in Spotify and also in Apple Podcast. And also, we back everything up. We will stream it on X. Follow me over on X, and you can watch it over there as well, at Simon Dixon Twit. And then make sure you've also got your login to the Bitcoin Hard Talk membership portal, where we host everything and give you content that's not available anywhere else. Just to go over to simondixon.com and hit that big yellow button, and it will guide you into the Bitcoin Hard Talk membership portal and how to create your username and login. So that's everything we got for this week in Bitcoin. We're now going to move over to the second part, this week in macro, and I'll be back just after my little drink of coffee. Hit the like, hit the share, and I'll be introducing you to what we're covering in part two and part three. Welcome, everybody, to Bitcoin Hard Talk, episode 96, part two, this week in macro. In this week in macro, we're going to be covering how the new Shanghai Proof-of-Weapons Network is threatening dollar dominance. And it is a journey. This is not a radical, it suddenly happens, but this is a journey, and there is no doubt in my mind that we had a massive escalation in terms of moving to the next phase of these multipolar world. And a multipolar world, you have multiple proof of weapons network. Now, at the moment, we have the US as the dominant proof of weapons network. That has transitioned over to BlackRock and the privatized companies and corporations. But there are other countries which remain sovereign: China, Russia, Saudi Arabia, and they've also put themselves together into blocks, which we cover in macro and we cover in the geopolitical section. But there was a show and a demonstration in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting this week. And I want to make sure you understand the implications as well. So let's cover some of the news stories, and then we're going to be diving deep into that as well. So this week, there was more consolidation of the US Proof-of-Weapons Network, which is being vassalized into BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard through its subsidiaries that I've always covered, that I collectively call the Proof-of-Weapons Network. One of the major banks, which is a shareholder in the Federal Reserve, which is able to print dollars, which is a publicly traded company with BlackRock as one of its largest shareholders, has decided to hand over $80 billion of wealth management services over to BlackRock. BlackRock, which has its Aladdin AI artificial intelligence technology, which has got vast data that even the Federal Reserve and the Treasury and many of the biggest asset managers use, is now consolidating more and more assets. So it's got another $80 billion of assets as Citibank is being consolidated and putting a bunch of its assets up the chain. Now, those that manage the assets are the controllers through those shares and those management agreements, which gives them more power in the Proof-of-Weapons network. And so Citibank is essentially moving out of wealth management now and handing over more of that power into, so they're now mainly a money printer with an investment bank and a retail bank, which means you get to create dollars through your retail bank or your commercial banking division. And through the investment banking division, you get to securitize, financialize, and create the products that essentially BlackRock and the asset managers, wealth managers purchase for other people using their money, which is pulled together through these large pools of capital, like either getting investment from sovereign wealth funds, endowment funds through colleges, insurance premiums through insurance contribution, pension funds, municipal funds, all sorts of funds that then hand over that money to BlackRock. Right. So we've been looking for this big trend. So obviously Trump has been pushing for his 300 points basis point cut at the Federal Reserve because he wants to roll over the trillions of dollars of debt with short-term 3 to 4 week bonds. And that is pushing up the price of the longer term bonds. There's been no action for a while. It's all calmed down in the US longer term bonds. But other nodes of the proof of weapons network, i.e. in Europe, are having some big problems, particularly this week, UK, leading up to the operation that I covered last week on September the 13th. And so that is in line with our predictions and forecast. You get financial distress. We'll go more into that. But on the US side, we had unemployment data from the US FOMC. That went to 4.3%. This basically builds the case for Jerome Powell, to do the next Fed rate cut. It will probably be a token cut of 0.25%. And the justification for it, because you've got Trump pressuring, they're trying to look like he's strong arming because he's going to be leaving in the second half of next year. He wants to go out in style, Jerome Powell, and Trump wants not for monetary policy reasons, because inflation is on the rise. And so when inflation is on the rise and you want to cut rate, the only thing you can look at is employment. And so if unemployment is increasing, then you can have a justification of why you might want to cut rates. And so really, I think this is sealing in. And we've had lots of manipulation with data where they keep correcting it. Now, Howard Lutnick saying he's going to put it all on a blockchain, which would be interesting. What about the corrections? But I think this all moves towards getting that cut that's going to happen in September, despite the fact that there is inflation, which is inherently inflationary. As Trump runs the economy hot and assets are going to go up, which pushes the K-shaped economy, which those in debt are going to get wrecked. Those that hold fiat currency are going to lose more value. And those that own assets are going to be the recipients of this essential fiscal dominant strategy that the Trump administration is going for. So this is expected to continue the inflationary trend up, and Trump is certainly going to be inflationary, especially if he gets his shadow Fed. We'll cover that in a little bit as well. But the drama that was happening over the last 2 weeks was all around the India and US trade war. It escalated significantly. So if you remember, I've always said that Trump is installed by the Proof-of-Weapons Network to implement the tariff policy to reset the world order into this multipolar world. And tariff was a way of drawing everyone closer to their regional blocks, whether it be the GCC, whether it be BRICS, whether it be the SCO that we'll be covering in a little bit. So we're seeing it in real time. And so while Modi went to visit the White House and was looking all good, we'll do a deal together, Trump was giving it the large one, make America great again. They're caving. There's going to be 0% tariffs on their side, various other things. We're going to bring in billions of dollars from India. It wasn't working the way they wanted it to work. And this also coincided with Trump taking credit for, the peace deal between India and Pakistan, which is a tension type of escalation. And India is an important part of BRICS. And so this was the excuse really to push India, the I in BRICS, closer to China, and also resolve many of those different types of disputes, those border disputes, because China has been working with Pakistan, who used to be vassalized by the IMF, and is now a part of the Belt and Road Initiative. And there's that power struggle between US and China, caught between the IMF and the Belt and Road Initiative, which has caused historic tensions with India. But in line with the announcement, America asked India to stop buying oil from Russia and put a lot of rhetoric around how India is funding the Ukraine war. Now, we know that the Ukraine war, if you've covered any of my previous episodes, that the Ukraine war is not going to end because it was an escalation of NATO deliberately by the CEO to vassalize Ukraine and take down Europe, and conquer more territory for Russia, negotiate those rare earth mineral deals. When you follow the money, you get and BlackRock was collateralizing a lot of the debt, and many of the countries like UK, Germany, France were going to be going into economic weakness as a result of China taking away its cheap gas. But India basically called for the US and basically called them out, saying, no, we won't do that. We won't stop importing gas and oil from Russia. And in fact, the US imports significantly from Russia. So why are you pretending to sanction and telling me we can't while you're still doing it? And also, Modi called out the European Union, saying that the European Union is giving it the large one and sanctioning Russia, but it's also importing from Russia still significantly. And so India there was a public fight, a bit of that hypocrisy was showing. And these are the types of destabilization campaign that I believe Trump, working for the financial industrial complex headed up by BlackRock, was allowed to be president and installed to achieve. And so what happened immediately afterwards? Well, Modi went and met with Putin and then headed over to China for the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, SCO, meeting. Now, what I want to do right now is give you a little bit of an AI summary of the meeting. I'm going to be publishing a blog later this week that really breaks it down. And then we're going to go through this new Shanghai Proof-of-Weapons Network that is emerging. So Azad, if we could play the SCO AI summary, we're going to play that right now, and then I'll be back right after to go through the macro implications.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're digging into some really eye-opening research by Simon Dixon. It's his paper, How the New Shanghai Proof-of-Weapons Network Threatens Dollar Dominance, a Multipolar World in Motion. Our job here is basically to give you a quick rundown, sort of an AI summary of his main points, get behind the headlines. Okay, let's unpack this. So picture this. First, you have this kind of quiet SEO summit in Tianjin almost flew under the radar. Then just days later, bam, a huge military parade in Beijing. Xi, Putin, Modi, even Kim Jong-un all standing together. Dixon says this whole sequence isn't just standard stuff. It's historic, like a public unveiling of this new system, one that's resistant to sanctions, mixing finance, AI, and serious military power.
That's exactly it. Dixon's argument is these aren't separate events. They're the reveal. He calls it the new Shanghai Proof-of-Weapons Network. Basically, a global alternative where, financial and tech independence aren't just ideas, they're backed up and enforced by actual military hardware you can see. Makes the whole thing sanctions-proof. The summit laid the tracks, and the parade really showed the muscle behind it.
Okay, so the SEO is really throwing down a financial challenge. Looking at Dixon's research, what are the key moves, the ones that are really designed to, shake up Western economic control?
Well, the main thing is building a whole separate infrastructure. Take the SEO Development Bank. It's set up as a direct rival to the IMF and World Bank, basically saying we don't need your institutions for funding.
Yeah.
And then there's their own settlement systems designed specifically to get around SWIFT. That means money can move without the U.S. watching, which really hits at the dollar's roll and trode. Plus, you've got China pushing its Beidou GPS alternative across these countries and this joint AI center. It's all about breaking free from Western tech platforms.
You mentioned India's role is critical here. What does Dixon say about Modi showing up? Why is that such a big deal? What makes India so sort of pivotal in this whole network?
India's interesting. It's got its own massive tech infrastructure, right? Like the Aadhaar ID system, their own payment network bypassing Visa, MasterCard. They're not easily pushed around. So Modi being there gives the whole SEO alliance this global legitimacy it might not have otherwise. Makes it look less like just a China-Russia thing. For Washington, Dixon argues it's a real headache. The U.S. wants India in its corner, but Modi's clearly playing both sides, moving towards more independence. Dixon even says that photo, Modi with Xi and Putin, could be one of the defining images of this decade.
Wow. Okay, switching gears then, from the money side to the military spectacle in Beijing, what kind of proof of weapons were they actually showing off, and what message were they trying to send?
Well, it was definitely a message, not just a show. They rolled out carrier killer missiles, hypersonic stuff clearly aimed at challenging U.S. sea power, drone swarms too, and even some kind of mystery laser weapon hinting at next-gen tech. You had nuclear powers, Russia, China, North Korea all together, showing off what Dixon calls deterrence in formation. It basically proved there's real military strength underpinning these new financial and tech systems.
Right. So with that military backing clear, Dixon looks at America's own long-standing network. He calls it the MIC, FIC, CIC, T-Court military, financial, consumption, and technical industrial complexes. Given this Shanghai challenge, how does Dixon see these U.S. complexes reacting? Are they adapting or are they vulnerable?
It changes everything for them. These new currency rails, they directly challenge Washington's control over global money flow, the FII, the financial complex. Dixon says it adapts. They start creating BRICS ETFs, swaps, money follows profit, not flags. But the CIC and tick consumption and tech, they're hit hard. They can't just pick up and move supply chains overnight. So they start demanding tariffs, subsidies, basically protection. Dixon even floats the idea that some of the strong U.S. reactions, like tariffs, might be partly political theater, managing the shift while looking tough.
Okay, so pulling it all together, what are the main takeaways from what Dixon calls America's turning point? And you mentioned weaponized finance. What exactly does that mean? And where does Bitcoin fit in this picture?
Right. Weaponized finance just means using access to the global financial system, trade, capital, even a country's currency as a weapon, sanctions, SWIFT cutoffs, that kind of thing. For America's turning point, Dixon lists about 7 key things: finance moving away from the dollar, military power becoming more balanced, AI sovereignty rising elsewhere, the financial sector hedging its bets, the consumption tech sectors getting exposed, India giving multipolarity a boost, and North Korea's presence solidifying that bloc. In this world, Bitcoin emerges as this kind of neutral ground. It's an escape hatch from weaponized finance. Now, the big financial players, the FIC, they want to custody Bitcoin, use it for leverage. But Dixon emphasizes self-custody. That's about individual survival, holding an asset neither side can fully control if you actually hold the keys yourself.
So the SEO summit, the Beijing parade, these weren't just events. They were the public launch, you could say, the launch of this new Shanghai Proof-of-Weapons Network, marking, as Dixon puts it, America's turning point.
Yeah.
The era of total dollar dominance, he argues, well, it's over. The world's got a new operating system, maybe with the Shanghai address.
Exactly. And in this emerging multipolar world, Bitcoin, specifically self-custody Bitcoin, becomes maybe the only settlement layer that neither major bloc can completely turn into a weapon against the individual. Self-custody is the proof, the leverage that remains ours. Something to think about, wouldn't you say?
Okay, so there's a little summary from the blog that I'm about to create. I'll make sure I dig into a few of the details. So for those of you that haven't heard of the SEO before, that's by design. You aren't meant to hear about it in Western media other than, those that are searching for it. And so maybe you did hear about it, but it consisted of about 11 members initially. But the important part on the geopolitical side, while we're focusing on the macro right now, is that the later members that joined were both India and Pakistan. Now, Trump wants to take credit for the peace agreement between India and Pakistan. India got all upset when Trump was taking credit for it. And then we had this public display and argument over oil and various other things that then drew India closer to China. And this isn't just a short-term thing. This is all theater. All of these things are determined in advance. They don't just happen. You don't make major, ginormous changes like that, just on the whims, like they would have you believe. But Trump is a destabilization campaign to reset the world order and push the world closer to these BRICS and GCC corridors while major disputes get settled and America is shrunk into a regional power and all military profits move over from the East back to the West. And so you have an escalation in Europe and Central America and South America, which I've been covering anyway. So India and Pakistan are members there, and obviously they have a lot of tension. And there is the US-China proxy war that's happening within Pakistan, and then the disputed Kashmiri area as well, which then ties into, on the border of Pakistan, is also Afghanistan and Iran as well. And Iran joined in 2023. And this is when we started seeing the normalization between Saudi Arabia and Iran that led to what we're going to be covering in part 3 in the geopolitical section as well. But also the SEO has partners and observers, which includes NATO, which obviously is strategically important. Sorry, not NATO, Turkey, which is obviously strategically important because they're essential for getting oil to Israel, and they are a member of NATO, and they started escalating and tying off trade with Israel, and we'll be covering more of that in the geopolitical section. And also Saudi Arabia, which is obviously very important because the source of most of the disruption within the Middle East is that Saudi Arabia and Israel aligned with the West, and Iran was aligning with the resistance. And therefore, you had all these funding of militias, like on the Western side, ISIS and Al-Qaeda, on the Iranian side, Hezbollah and Hamas and the Houthis. And that created the profits for the military industrial complex to have these forever wars through this strategic tensions like Operation Gladio, and a narrative to pitch to the West that whenever you wanted to engage in these wars and this disruption, you could paint that it was the war on terror and various other things. But another member as well is Egypt, which becomes strategically important in the Northern African region close to the Middle East. And so this is a very important corridor for the Belt and Road Initiative. And when you reset the world order and drive India closer to BRICS, which was already done, like they were obviously, because they have a lot of securitization and financialization, BlackRock and the Proof-of-Weapons Network wanted to escalate a war to see if they could get more and more spending from India over to America, but they started spending in Russia, and therefore the tactic didn't work, and we had this resolution. My suspicion is it was China that actually resolved it, as was the peace agreement between Iran and Saudi Arabia. But as usual, Trump would take credit because the falling empire is using its media and propaganda. As it is shrunk to a regional power, it needs to look as good as possible in front of its host nation. And so this week, we had 2 events, and they were back to back. We had the SEO Summit, which was in Tianjin in China, And this was essentially revealing, I think, the financial architecture and really the technical architecture, what I would call in the US Proof-of-Weapons Network with BlackRock as CEO, the financial industrial complex and the technical industrial complex. So in Shanghai, they've been building their financial industrial complex and technical industrial complex, but all of it is subordinate to the vast sovereign wealth and gold reserves. And they don't have a Western banking system, where a central bank becomes turns all of the companies where the government becomes subordinate to the large corporate interests like we have at the West. And because the government still remains sovereign, you have like 99% real estate penetration from the people and vast investment in infrastructure, because the country's not taken over by companies that only care about profit, stock prices, financialization, and securitization. And so you have these two models competing at the moment. One's more authoritarian, the other has the freedom of speech element to it. But we're seeing this alternative proof of weapons network build, and that has led to significant investment in this alternative technical industrial complex and financial industrial complex. But they're all state banks, which is the opposite of the American system with the Federal Reserve, which is owned by the private banks, and the private banks then can lobby and own government. And now the government doesn't work for the people; it only works for the corporate interest. And so you have this hostile takeover of the collective West, where they're essentially waging war on our own people, not investing in our own people, and creating civil unrest so that they can buy assets for pennies on the dollar and the cheap. But the second meeting was essentially the military industrial complex division of the Shanghai Proof-of-Weapons Network. And this is where they had a massive military parade. And this is where all of their weapons are on full display. And it was attended by both China, Putin, Russia, North Korea, and collectively, this creates this new Shanghai Proof-of-Weapons Network, which is kind of a multipolar world order demonstration. And it's enforced by its finances, the Shanghai Financial Industrial Complex, artificial intelligence, technical industrial complex, and its weapons through the military industrial complex, but also more decentralized because it relies upon regional powers and regional blocks where China is the manufacturing base for them all. And so there, rather than doing the old tactic of the International Monetary Fund, which is where you destroy countries, don't allow them to compete, do economic hitmen techniques. If you want to learn more, read John Perkins' Confessions of an Economic Hitman. And do the neo-colonialism mercantile strategy of destabilizing countries, installing puppet governments, and making everyone your enemy, which was the US, who had the proxy vote over the International Monetary Fund. So the post-Bretton Woods World War II world order that America became the empire on. Instead, they're using their financial industrial complex to say, we won't interfere in your politics. We will do the same technique of lending you money, and we'll build your infrastructure. And if you default, we will, own those assets but we want you to succeed because we want you to buy our products, and we don't care about how you govern your country. We won't interfere. And so more and more people across the entire global South are comparing the IMF with the Belt and Road. And now you've got these BRICS investment bank and this SCO investment bank as well, that is providing all of this capital. And that's why the world's order is being reset. And BlackRock, who controls the collective West, is now negotiating with these sovereign countries. And that's why you had the tariff policy, in my opinion. And so the global South and basically the domestic consumer industrial complexes, by investing in all these countries, they want to replace the 15% of goods that are exported to America to other countries, and they've got the whole world to look at. And so this is about building up the rest of the world in a post-colonial European American colonized world, making those countries more wealthy so that they can buy from China. And if America flexes and said, right, we're going to enter into a trade war, which they knew they couldn't win. I mean, we've been covering it throughout the whole thing, right on Liberation Day, which was liberation from the dollar day, on April the 2nd. I covered everything that would happen. And this is resetting the world order. It wasn't about anything else. And so, China wants to replace that 15% by having internal consumption, i.e. a wealthier population with a wealth effect that owns all their real estate in the country as it grows, and also builds up other countries. Now, I'm not saying China's the perfect. It's got authoritarianism. It's got its own humanitarian crisis. We're going to be criticizing the Shanghai Proof-of-Weapons Network as it becomes a more dominant power in this multipolar world, because that's what we do. But now we are criticizing the BlackRock one because it's creating all the crimes against humanity. And China is not aggressive in terms of war. BlackRock and military industrial complex and the Proof-of-Weapons Network is very aggressive, connected to every single war that's happening in the world today. And so at the conference, at the SCO summit, they announced basically the financial and technology blueprint that they would like to be moving forward, any country that wants to be a member of the SCO. So they announced the SCO Development Bank, which is going to be an alternative to the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. What else did Trump do? He weakened all of the constructs of the US empire, USAID, National Endowment of Democracy, said NATO, you got to go on your own, and really weaken the constructs of what made America able to dominate through terrorism many different countries. Now, one of the other things is obviously the payment system. So they announced their new payments and settlement systems. And so this is in the case of, if you go, I used to live in Hong Kong, you have UniPay, which is an alternative to Visa or MasterCard. India has their own, and they're building their own networks that bypass SWIFT so that countries can continue if they get sanctioned by the dollar. Also, they announced their energy cooperation platform. And so this is how they circumvent sanctions. Essentially, you can deposit and get a credit with China, and you can place an order for all of the goods that your country needs. And it technically has this almost barter-like system that technology makes possible today. And you can get around it that way because they can continue to price in dollars if they want without propping up the dollar as well. But you can also do that through the Chinese system, the Indian systems, and basically this cooperation platform where you can do oil and gas trades outside of the US dollar. And already the petrodollar has gone down from 100% to 70% through Saudi Arabia's relationship with China, because America is looking for Saudi to invest. And remember, foreign direct investment means you're relinquishing control. Think of the IMF model. The IMF invests in order to take over countries. So when America's looking for foreign direct investment, they're relinquishing control. The key assets gets owned by the other regional powers. And so that's the same with these different BRICS investment banks and these SCO investment banks as well. But Saudi is now investing in artificial intelligence and everything in America, which is more control over the American assets, while simultaneously the biggest customer of Saudi is China. And so they're going to go with their customer as well. So that's why the petrodollar, has reduced to 70%. Now, dollar's still important. Don't get me wrong. This is a slow transition. This is a controlled demolition because of the very unique situation right now. But anyway, they can clear and they can do these deals and settle without US dollars, with no dollar clearing required. And that's why you're seeing central banks and the price of gold go up and the penetration of dollars as reserve currencies at central banks decrease, which is the longer term trend. They also announced their Artificial Intelligence Innovation Center. So just like America wants to get its AI global, China wants to get its AI global as well. And so it's basically a sovereign machine learning infrastructure. And we know what that comes with: surveillance. We know what's being built up in the West. Everybody that's getting these Palantir contracts, are being surveilled into this artificial intelligence infrastructure. And so any country that wants to choose between the American side or the China side, they get to do that. And Baidu as well announced its Chinese GPS expansion. And so there is more competition with Google and the different types of companies as well. Putin was there, and Russia proposed an actual SCO bond as well. And so remember, in Russia, they've been working with structured products built upon Bitcoin to experiment with that as well. But now they're going for SCO bonds based upon local currencies. The really important thing, as was covered in the AI summary, is that Modi was present there during all of these public displays between Modi and Trump and US and India, which really strengthened the whole BRICS game as well. And this is what really makes it a public game changer. Now, I believe the game changer has happened all along. But Modi basically was standing there with Xi Jinping and Putin, which really legitimizes the SCO bloc, because now you've got not just a Russia-China thing, not just Iran and China sanctioned countries, but you've now got half of the world's population and a significant chunk of the world's GDP. And so what does India bring to the table? Where India has been building a vast, so America relies upon India, and almost like these H-1B visas, where India has taken over Silicon Valley in terms of many of the executives are Indian executives. We're not just talking about, programmers, we're talking about higher paid jobs as well. And so remember what Elon said. He wanted to be anti-immigration, but he went nuts around debates when the America First agenda wanted to constrict H-1B visas, showing the sheer hypocrisy of everything. So they pretend to be anti-immigration, but they want immigration for their team members. But that technology has been going back to India, and they've been building their independent technology, just as China has been building their independent technology, which shows you that there is no America First agenda in charge of America, because BlackRock is globally invested and they're resetting the world order. And so what's India got that they bring to the table? Well, they built out a biometric ID and a domestic payments rails across the largest population in the world. And so this bypasses Visa and MasterCard. And it also has allowed India to, kind of build this block where you can fund your country even if you're sanctioned, which is what India has been supporting both Iran and Russia in doing with their relationship through this SCO block and this BRIC blocks. And so India has been discounting Russian crude oil imports. It's been refining it and building its own refinement capabilities. And then it's been resold, which is how Europe is getting some of this oil and of the other relationship, which is undermining sanctions. And it's saying we want to be neutral. We don't adhere to American sanctions. And also it's been defense hedging. So it's been doing it in a few ways. It's been buying weapons from the US Proof-of-Weapons Network via the military industrial complex, but it's also been purchasing from the Russian Proof-of-Weapons Network via the Russian military industrial complex. And it's also been building out its own manufacturing base and been doing more and more independently within India. And so this is really pushing and publicly signaling that while India has these kind of alliances with Israel, because it's also engaging in its own crazy policy of ethnic cleansing with the Muslim and the Hindu populations in order to create its own, fighting back against its own proof-of-weapons network, U.S. civil unrest campaign for vassalization, securitization, and financialization, which the West were using to get more and more of a grip over India, but it's losing that grip. And this really is multipolar sovereignty. And so as BlackRock and Goldman Sachs, were the ones that really pushed for BRICS in the first place, I think this is an indication, more and more of an indication, that the theory that we've been covering over the years on Bitcoin Hard Talk is correct, and the general macro and geopolitical side as well. And this was the reason for Trump tariffs, as I said, in the first place. So we had narratives publicly, like Navarro came out and said, Ukraine is Modi's war, in order to drive those wedges, that public display, saying that Modi is responsible for all the deaths in Ukraine as a result of trading with Russia. And so you had this public display of US frustration. And then we went right into the Beijing parade, really displaying on full display the China Proof-of-Weapons Network as well. And so the idea was this, is to showcast the different types of weaponry to say, we're happy with the relationship with Taiwan. We stick to the one China policy, but America, you build your chips. Trump, you go buy Intel. You can follow the China model and start nationalizing aspects of your quote unquote capitalism. But at the same time, we've got our abilities, stay away and stop expanding into Philippines and Japan and Taiwan and the Asia Pacific region that the military industrial complex is currently profiting from as well. And so this really is, I don't know much about missiles, so I'll just put a few things that I listed here. So those military experts, you can put in the comment section, those that are really interested in this stuff. But some of the things were carrier knife missiles, hypersonics, which is the new form of missiles, which was beta tested in Iran penetrating Israel as well, which is kind of a resistance against anti-US Navy for the Asia Pacific region. Drone swarms as well, underwater systems that were on demonstration. These are kind of the asymmetric counters to a lot of the buildup in the Asia Pacific region. They also mentioned their mystery laser weapons. You saw some of those demonstrations with Russia in the Ukraine side, which really just shows that Ukraine is being sacrificed, as we've always covered. They will fight till the last Ukrainian. I'm sorry, Ukraine is over because NATO wants it that way. And obviously the ECB and the Bank of England and the IMF will be paying for it, which is why the civil unrest campaign that's happening that I've always been covering in Europe. It also demonstrated the nuclear, different types of nuclear capable systems, and different armed columns as well. You can tell I'm not a military guy, but I understand that they're demonstrating all of this stuff because it's all optics. That's the whole point of this. It is a demonstration that the world order has changed. And at this, you had Xi Jinping, you had Putin, and you had Kim Jong-un all together, which are all three military powers creating one form of military bloc, one nuclear-backed bloc, to really solidify essentially that there is competition now to tame the US Proof-of-Weapons Network and the legacy system, the military industrial complex that essentially, was really placed there to prop up the demand for dollar based upon forcing the world to buy the petrodollar, oil denominated in dollars, weapons denominated in dollars, which created this structural bid for the dollar, which was also enforced by the financial industrial complex that used the International Monetary Fund to create colored revolutions, destroy countries, overthrow governments, install Western debt-based Ponzi scheme central banks, and force them to print their currency, which created hyperinflation to service their dollar debt. And then they end up lending that debt, those dollars, to the US government so that they could prop up the demand for US treasuries that would then prop up this debt-based Ponzi scheme where the government could also borrow and vassalize countries. And the financial industrial complex, which now has been epitomized by BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, Citibanks, this kind of apex of finance that structurally pushed up the demand for dollars, is now going to eventually need to hedge into this world order. And when you want to reset it, you use the Federal Reserve, which is owned by the banks, and you change the flow of capital via BlackRock, and the government has nothing they can do about that as well. Also, the consumer industrial complex. This is where you had companies like Amazon, Apple, Pfizer. They forced all of these deals to be done in dollars. They perpetuated these different routes all around the world. And this really created this dollar clearing department and network and demand for dollars, which also perpetuated the petrodollar, the euro dollar, and the demand for treasuries and the debt of the US government. To make that go further, the US Proof-of-Weapons Network had its technical industrial complex, companies like Microsoft, Google, Intel, and these are kind of these global supply chains based upon technical supremacy, which has taken over the US stock market, where the Magnificent Seven has created real dominance in terms of technology. And this is really a dollar clearing system, which was near total control of the world via dollar dominance. And that created the demand for debt, which is what led to this global system where China had the manufacturing base and America had the consumption, that drove this globalist agenda and this trade war that America can absolutely never win, which is how I knew the trade war was not a trade war. It was a reset of the world order, and Trump was on board of that. But through this dollar dominance, you now have the ability to use sanctions to weaponize currency in order to destroy economies, create wars, and force country into dollar adoption. That is weakened. And so now we're moving over to this multipolar world. That changes everything. That's the shift that we're seeing right now. Because now you have the Shanghai Proof-of-Weapons Network versus the US legacy Proof-of-Weapons Network that will dominate its region. We're having a transition process without complete, destruction of the Proof-of-Weapons Network assets. But eventually, the Proof-of-Weapons Network won't control the dollar. And so at some point, there will be a calculation that BlackRock Aladdin will do that say, what is the optimum time to shift capital over to these different companies and deliberately reduce the demand for the dollar while we create the financial products to shift capital away from the US Proof-of-Weapons Network over to BRICS denominated and SCO denominated financial products as well. So my prediction is that BRICS won't do the single currency. I think they watched what happened to Europe. Who was pushing that? It was Goldman Sachs that was pushing the BRICS single currency. And so clearly the euro single currency was a technique to control Europe. And so I think BRICS have said, let's not do that. Let's all have our own currencies. And we won't be in a situation where we risk losing all our sovereignty, just like the EU. And that's a protectionist strategy. So most people think of BRICS as a currency. Now you've got to think of it as everyone keeping their own currencies, but they will be at the right time propped up by the global Proof-of-Weapons Network that is transitioning away to US alliance over to this globalist capital flows as well. And so over time, you'll have these local currencies that can essentially weaken the dollar by issuance control, and the financial industrial complex will be the ones that actually do that in competition with sovereign finance as well, which is why they won't allow a debt-based Ponzi scheme to exist as well. And so eventually, I think the financial industrial complex will adapt. It will denominate its ETFs in BRICS currencies, which it started to already do. It will create a wider and wider swap market that is not aligned with just propping up the dollar. It will create more and more derivatives, which Russia started to do with Bitcoin structured products in BRICS currencies. Basically, profit will follow yield. And so BlackRock will start to reallocate more and more capital in this controlled demolition. It doesn't want to give away all of its power because it wants to suck out of the West as much as it can while it can control the dollar. The banks create the dollar. That allows them to buy assets, and it creates all of this wealth inequality until they control everything. Eventually, that leads to civil unrest, but until it leads to civil unrest and people won't buy those bonds anymore, they'll rinse as much assets by destroying the West and buying it through private equity, which we're seeing more and more of at the current model at the moment. Remember, it has no ethics. Goldman Sachs is not aligned to any country and is a demonic force in terms of its belief around what's right for humanity. And so the military industrial complex will continue to leverage instability essentially push out fund defense narratives to sell more weapons to Philippines, Asia Pacific, create as much turmoil across Europe to sell more weapons, which was everyone needs to put their NATO budget up to 5%. And they'll do that because they just want to push the profits of Lockheed Martin, General Dynamic. America gets more GDP, and America gets more and more civil unrest from the K-shaped economy. And so what do we see from the Proof-of-Weapons Network? Well, it's taking its old techniques of destroying countries and it's coming in on itself. It's cannibalizing itself because it's now stateless. And it's managing that transition and managing and optimizing its portfolio using your pension, which is the irony of this whole thing. It's why I encourage people to opt out and boycott BlackRock, because while we probably won't have a massive impact, at least we'll be sovereign in our own right and we can help other people and we can direct the flow of our money. At least we can boycott in our way. I think they're too powerful. There's no reversing this train. This is the West's moment where it allowed this to happen. It's basically coming after its profits from the fact that there are a competing proof-of-weapons network within Europe and within Central America and South America, which is why you're seeing this escalation with Venezuela, despite the fact that it's the CIA that lets the drugs in, but it needs this type of escalation. And so anyone that is an American neighbor is going to be the new target for profits, lost profits by the military industrial complex. And it will continue to control its region, which is why I don't think the China or Shanghai Proof-of-Weapons Network, it will probably be exited from Latin America. And I think the legacy US Proof-of-Weapons Network will control that region. It may even start escalating into the Greenland narrative, which will push further war with Europe as well. So we'll see how far it goes. But basically expect the consumer industrial complex and the technical industrial complex, the Apples, the Microsoft, they're going to continue to lobby the European Union and the US Congress. They'll be doing it through tariffs. They'll be doing it through different subsidies that it will be asking for through big, beautiful bills. And it will be lobbying for an anti-China rhetoric to continue because they can't relocate easily. While Apple is located in China, it still depends upon credit cards in America. And it's not going to be easy for Apple to compete with the equivalent in China. And so they are still location dependent, and that creates the power struggle as we go through this transition. And so that's why you'll get a lot more Europe for surveillance contracts, Palantir contracts, civil unrest that drives the profit engine by money printing from the Bank of England and European Central Bank. That's why we're getting all of these, Muslim hate and Jew rule the world conspiracies. I covered all of that last week if you want to get through that as well. I don't want to cover that ground as well. But this has happened before. If you think this is a conspiracy theory, this is exactly what happened when we had the transition from the British Empire to the American Empire, and in fact, the Dutch Empire to the British Empire. You had the Dutch East India Company, which consolidated vast colonial mercantile wealth. It managed those wars and it ran a portfolio. And it wasn't until the Brits invented the naval ships and started to become the rising power, because cheap labor to build those ships, Britain was the cheap labor then. And then it got more productive and started to build up the British Empire, and then took over the colonial empires as well. Well, that's exactly what happened in this managed transition from Britain to America. The British East India Company was slowly unwound, and you had the decolonization effect of transferring these assets through neocolonialism to America, which was done through covert wars and funding of militias around the world and colored revolutions. But now BlackRock is more powerful than the US government, so it's cannibalizing the US and Europe to shift the power up to BlackRock, which is the equivalent of the British East India Company, but a more decentralized network. It's not one company. And so they're managing this transition. And so they can manage over to BRICS currencies. And when they really want to, when there is no more to squeeze out of Apple and Amazon and everything, they can just shift their capital over and they can justify it. And so you'll just get an influx of capital once they built enough products and swaps and various other things to, Aramco and Huawei and these different types of companies, but they'll build the financial products first. But they will be less powerful because they don't control the money printing of the dollar. It will only be as powerful as the money printing of the euro and the pound and the previous empires as well. And so that's how this transition that I think we're going through right now will be managed, and we'll keep covering it as well. And this is why you had kind of the Trump's reaction and the rage and the theater and all this stuff you're seeing right now, the tariff war on India, accused Modi of basically free riding of the American economy, destroying Ukraine, being evil, this attack on the Federal Reserve, removing dollar independence, and these appearing very unhinged. But as I said, I think he's a covert financial industrial complex operative, and you can see that in all of his lobby funding. He was funded by the Bank of New York Mellon family, a member of the financial industrial complex. Elon Musk, a member of the technical industrial complex. Also Adelson, which is the Israeli lobby side of the narrative, which is a covert way of Israel is a military industrial complex operative to create carnage in the region. And we'll cover more about that in part 3. But the idea is everything has to be wrapped up in a MAGA narrative. This is about making America great again. This is MAGA tariffs. This is rebuilding the manufacturing base. This is bringing jobs back to America. But we know what they're building. They're building a regional technocracy, a corporatocracy with consolidated power, destroying Main Street over to Wall Street, artificial intelligence and robotics. I'm sad to say there is no Make America Great Again. There is no Make Europe Great Again. They are all wolf in sheep clothing. And if you listen to them and continue to believe them, I'm sorry, they will wreck you. You got to make yourself great again. Covered that many, many times. And that's why you have to own assets and you have to boycott the system. Wall Street will prop up BRICS and manage the transition, push products across while it vassalizes the West, which is what we're seeing right now. Okay. And India is one of those swing states of these managed transition. I talked earlier about how I believe that what happened between Pakistan and India was kind of, it's a theory, but I think that was part of this managed transition. But it was likely China that resolved it, but Trump took the credit. So you get this managed theater of him wanting his Nobel Peace Prize, Pakistan nominating, India getting pissed off, and then this SEO type of thing as well. So anyway, India is currently energy hedging. As I said, buying Russia from crude, importing, doing all of that type of thing. Finance hedging, doing deals in the rupee and the ruble, the yuan, and creating those swap contracts. We're starting to see more and more of that. It's tech hedging. It's got its sovereign. It's got its own chips that it's manufacturing. It's got its own cloud policy, so it doesn't need to rely upon America or China data centers. And I said that it's defense hedging. It's buying from the US, it's buying from Russia, and it's building its own manufacturing base. It's importing, as well as building its domestic capabilities as well. India basically just treats every single demand as a negotiation point, and is independent and sovereign. And it plays both sides, and it does it very effectively, which is why it's the fastest growing economy with the largest population, and why it is, drawing closer to China as its neighbor and resolving many of those border disputes as well. And that is why it's America's turning point. This is the slow decline of the demand for the dollar, just like it was for the British Empire during World War I and World War II. And as I said, on April the 2nd, go back to the Bitcoin Hard Talk if you want, I said that Liberation Day was to liberate the emerging markets and the collective global South away from the dollar, except for its regional neighbors, which will all be terrorized by the military industrial complex and vassalized by the financial industrial complex, as finance is escaping the dollar and moving over to more financial products denominated in SEO, BRICS currencies, and alternative trade routes. You'll have military parity, where essentially the new multipolar world. And I think that makes everything better. And of course, the AI race, we'll be covering more about that. I promised for a while I'll do an update on who's winning the AI race. But AI sovereignty is you can either work with America or you can work with the SEO, and they're building those Baidu, to really challenge the US Proof-of-Weapons Network. So you'll be able to hedge by block, and that's where I think everything's moving to, regional blocks as a result of this, and that's why everything's changing. Okay. The SEO meeting was really that pivotal moment, and also the military display. My prediction here is that I think Bitcoin, while I'd love for it to say that we're going to take down the Proof-of-Weapons Network, it allows you to boycott and exit the Proof-of-Weapons Network. These networks are too powerful. And so while I'd love to buy into the ideology of Bitcoin taking over the world and creating this strategically neutral, I don't think that's going to happen. We're going to enter a multipolarity, and Bitcoin is a way for a few people that get this, that follow Bitcoin Hard Talk, to be able to have neutrality and the ability to exit the system, boycott the system. But if it's ever done at scale, that's why BlackRock is trying to accumulate as much as possible. And that's our battle. That's our resistance. They want to make it convenient, tax efficient for you and all the Americans to give your Bitcoin to BlackRock, and they'll create many financial products to get you to borrow against it and use the old weapons. Because eventually I do think that Bitcoin is going to be used as part of the strategic negotiation and weaponized by foreign sovereigns in these currency wars that will be coming ahead as more and more products. And they will be using Bitcoin denominated financial products to try and fool you into giving your Bitcoin. And that will be a global trend as well, I predict. And that's why the Operation Choke Point 2.0 happened. They decided that Bitcoin is too important. They're not ignoring it. They launched the Bitcoin ETF. They created the institutional custody services. They created the borrow against your Bitcoin, financialized, securitized, and it's all and they started doing the Wall Street lobbying, and the stable coins and the tokenization which is all for, maintaining power and control in the surveillance state we've been covering. They want your Bitcoin in their custody, and they want to use it as leverage. For us, for Bitcoin Hard Talk members, for people that you share this with, we do self-custody, and you can go to simondixon.com, become a free member of the Bitcoin Hard Talk membership portal, and get your 8-module guide to self-custodying completely free, because that's our survival and that's our boycott. And maybe we have a bigger impact than I thought was possible, but I think we're going to still enter this multipolar world. Because Bitcoin will be a bargaining chip for these countries as well. And it will be a neutral settlement rail. And neither the US or BRICS will want that to happen. They can't fully control it. But they don't want it to dominate the whole system, because I still think they'll still have a power in the future. So Bitcoin isn't just digital gold, which is why you end up, Wall Street will tell you, number go up, technology, fixed supply. That's just one part of it. The rest of it is money you can own and money you have as money you can spend, and the ability to countries, I think, will use it as a weapon as well. Okay. I just wanted to cover a few more points in the macro section before we go into the geopolitical section. And I'm going to speed through these as well. But I said that UK is the next target, and that really ratcheted up this week. So the yield on the 30-year bond, which is the cost to lending to the UK government for 30 years, the 30-year gilt, they call it the gilt, it rose up sharply to 5.64%, and then it went above 5.7%, and it had a real sharp increase. This is its highest since 1998. So the lead up to the dot-com boom and bust. The yields on the UK are now, so remember, bonds crash because people are selling, but yields go up because when they issue these new bonds, they have to pay a higher yield to persuade you to lend your government. But they're now 15 times higher than what they were in 2020, during the COVID period as well. So that was when they were at their low, and that was just 5 years ago. So they're at that, this is a serious reflection of what's happening with the UK economy right now. To give you some more stats of what we've seen, spending in the UK is set to cross 60% of gross domestic product. That compares to 53% during the pandemic. So during lockdown, they were spending 53% of GDP when all economic activity was shut down. They're open now and they're spending more, 60%. Revenue as a percentage, the amount of money that they're bringing in as a percentage of the GDP in the UK is drifting away slightly. It's not as concerning, but it's lower. It's gone below 40%. But they did some projections, and this is what lead to this. The projections, by their own projection, the UK government said that by 2073, the UK's debt is on course, if it continues along its current projectile, to be 274% of GDP if it doesn't make a change, which means that change is inevitable, and that will lead to full vassalization, which is why we got the civil unrest campaign I've been warning about. And Elon is not a Samaritan. He's a part of the technical industrial complex. Anybody that is part of the Proof of Weapons Network has to be part of that agenda, because Tesla relies upon government contracts. It relies upon Wall Street. Any company that is Silicon Valley or public has to bow down to the Proof of Weapons Network, or they can't get the access to the funds they need to borrow to buy back the stocks, to get into the S&P, to be one of those magnificent seven. It's a mafia network, and Elon is in it. And if they can't control you, they do all the different types of blackmail operations as well. This would basically imply that the UK deficit that is running at a massive 21% of GDP, the interest on this debt alone would be equal to 13% of GDP. That is unsustainable. Interest on the debt would be 13% of all of the income of the country. Under that assumption, consumer price inflation in the UK went up right now to about 3.8% was in July, and it's expected to go above 4%. And that's going to be coming in August. So this is higher than the US, as you'd expect. But this is double the level that the Bank of England says that it is targeting. So the Bank of England has lost control of inflation, even though they basically cut rates significantly. And so as deficit spending is soaring at the moment, so they're spending more, inflation is rebounding up. The Bank of England has been cutting interest rates. This is down to about 4% now. So inflation and rates are in parity at the moment. And economic growth has become so weak in the UK that they basically have no other option but to continue cutting rates, which is inflationary. And so the Bank of England is basically calling some of its inflation. Do you remember this? The Federal Reserve technique. We had the Bank of England now, a fully vassalized state, calling the inflation that we're experiencing in the UK as transitory. Where did we hear that one before? And we know what followed: massive inflation in the US when the Fed said it's transitory. So GDP growth in the UK is completely flattened off. And in Q3 2024, it actually went into negative growth. So negative growth, higher inflation. The UK is basically streaming towards stagflation. And this will be for the first time since 2008, which led to the global financial crisis. Where did that start? It started with the investment banking takeover of Iceland that led to distress in Northern Rock, which is a UK bank that Virgin ended up buying, I think, in the end. And BlackRock engineered the process of which banks were acquired, which was the consolidation of power using BlackRock's Aladdin artificial intelligence. What did they buy? They bought Barclays, a UK bank's ETF department that gave them the vassalization control in this multi-decade operation. So what is Britain's growth plan in order to get out of this? Well, the idea is to push public debt beyond 100% of GDP. It's approaching 100%. It's in financial crisis. I believe this will potentially lead to a blame shift scenario. How do you blame shift? What you have to do? Well, what you do is you take out an IMF bailout. Now, there was just a few people that were pushing the IMF narrative. It's pretty speculative. I'm not sure whether they're going to do it. They have done it previously in the 1970s. But there was rumors, and maybe these are controlled narratives, that the UK is going to need an IMF bailout. Now, what does an IMF bailout come with? It is the economic hitmen at the IMF using the tactics that they used on the global south on the UK itself. What does it come with? It comes with austerity. So you have significant economic weakness, cutting, and BlackRock acquires all the assets. And so this is why ordinary Britons have to pay the bill. They'll get less subsidies, less welfare, and that will lead to the austerity, which is needed. There's no two ways about it. And that's because they run their own debt-based Ponzi scheme. The Bank of England was the creator of this. But what do the UK government get to do when they take an IMF bailout? They get to blame it on the IMF. So it's a blame shift exercise. And they get to point to those austerity while US companies acquire all the distressed assets and control more and more of the country. Who are the US companies? The Proof-of-Weapons Network. So it's a full-blown takeover vassalization. And who are they partnering with in these investments? Sovereign wealth funds in the Middle East, which is why you're getting these negotiations between the Middle East to get the Proof-of-Weapons Network out of their country. And these vassalization strategies. Now, you use NATO in order to escalate more and more war, which gets more and more ECB and Bank of England printed money over to US GDP. and you get the justification for the quantitative easing that's needed based upon having an IMF guarantee or bailout as well. So for 2025 alone, what have we done? We've sent, while this is happening, $4.5 billion of direct military aid to Ukraine. That's all propped up the BlackRock Proof-of-Weapons Network, funded all the corrupt politicians that are owned by the Proof-of-Weapons Network. We've also taken a £2.26 billion loan, billion-dollar loan, which is G7 backed and to be repaid by frozen Russian assets, but we've guaranteed that as well. So we have to make sure that those frozen assets happen. The $350 million investment in drone production is also something we've signed up for. The EU and the US, by the way, as I said, they're still importing billions of dollars from Russia and pretending that they're sanctioning the whole horse and pony show. While America's funding USAID in order to fund US media and BBC media as well. On top of that, what is Britain committing to do is pledged $3 billion that they're going to spend every year on who? Israel, up until 2030 to 31, in order to train its military industrial complex on the same technology that Israel's using to commit genocide as a service and occupation as a service. Is also spending $2 billion basically to train these 60,000 British troops a year in Britain using this occupation as a service technology. So basically, on the guidance of the occupying power, that is a colony of America and the mafia of the Proof-of-Weapons Network, and those that created the technology for occupation as a service and all of the artificial intelligence technology and surveillance technology, just in case anybody wants to, leave the UK. Why would they need to do that? Because they're probably going to apply a wealth tax and an exit tax. So for the next 5 years, you have to pay tax on all your assets if you dare to try and leave the UK. This is the UK following the US model. You become a lifetime taxpayer even when you try to escape. These are my speculations of where it's all headed to, which is why you had that exodus of wealthy people, billionaires and millionaires, all leaving. The plan is simple. It's to fund wars. It's to spend budget on occupation. It's to implement surveillance. It's to use artificial intelligence. And it's a formula that basically grows US GDP at the expense of the British people that are basically managing these manufactured civil unrest campaigns. Exactly what they did in the global south. This is the colonial tactics coming on itself. And this is what I try to warn against everybody, that Elon's not here to help you. Tommy Robinson's not here to go anti-immigration. He's okay with Indian immigrants. He's just stirring up the anti-Muslim narrative to reignite the war on terror, which was an operation in the first place to implement Patriot Act. Sorry, I've gone deeper into it. But this is all about pushing forward the pre-crime agenda, which will be, all of the technology in Washington. And yes, September the 13th is highly, highly likely to be the civil unrest campaign, the flashpoint that Elon and Tommy is taking us through for the Proof-of-Weapons Network, all because they did that immigration policy to manufacture this very type of environment. Make sure you watch last week's episode. I went in deep detail, and I really want people to understand it. Once you understand these things, you can predict them as they're coming. It's all about manufacturing consent, manufacturing compliance, and then the solution is there, which is Peter Thiel, Elon Musk technology, which were funded by the CIA and Palantir and all these different types of things. And obviously, immigrants will be the ones that they'll blame because they manufactured it in the first place. And it's real. People are angry. People are angry, is it? But everybody's nearly a pawn in the operation. and all the profits go back. And so my advice is exit while you can. I don't know any other way because I don't see how this changes. I don't see the solution, and you have to really decide where you want to live, because what are the wealthy doing? They've already left. They're leaving in drove. And where did they go? They went to the Middle East. They've gone to UAE. That's the highest recipient. What's happening in Japan? They're freeing themselves from the Proof-of-Weapons Network. That means more inflation. And we're seeing the 30-year bond in Japan reflect that as well. It just broke 3.2%. That was for the first time in history. We also saw a similar narrative in France as well, exact same thing. But France can't print its own currency. It's vassalized into the European Central Bank. So that takes what happens in France across the whole region. So you've got these three different experiments. You've got Japan leaving. You got all of these reset of orders with the BRICS and GCC territories. And so what is actually happening? And then you've got the France and European campaign. Gold is on fire. Gold hits new all-time highs on the macro section. World central banks, gold holdings have now gone to 27% of total foreign reserves. That's the highest in 29 years. So they are selling dollars and buying gold. They're protecting themselves wherever they can find the gold. Foreign holdings of US treasuries as a percentage of their actual reserves has declined now to 23%. That's the lowest since 2008, before the global financial crisis. Global central banks now hold more gold than treasuries, and that's for the first time since 1996, leading to the 2000 dot-com boom and bust. And this trend has basically begun decades ago. This has been a multi-decade trend. And this basically really, really accelerated after the 2023. After 2023, what happened? Sorry, in 2022. What happened in 2022? That's when the operation to seize Russia's frozen assets, which was the preceder to the tariff policy, and there was COVID before that. All of those together created this exact type of environment, and that was the real reduction in treasuries and a movement over to gold. And so since 2015, it's been reported that global central bank gold holdings have basically risen to 3,500 tons now. So it rose by 3,500 tons and is now at 36,500 tons, which is the highest since the 1970s, which was the stagflation environment. So foreign central banks, they're loading up on gold. Individuals are loading up on Bitcoin. The Proof-of-Weapons Network is trying to get you to own their Bitcoin through their Bitcoin ETF. And at the same time, we're getting these big destabilization campaigns happening in America. We had Trump firing the Fed governor, Cook. Now they want a majority of the governor cabinet, whatever you call it, on the Federal Reserve. This is removing Federal Reserve independence. That was a cornerstone of global capital trust in the dollar. Trump will essentially likely control 4 of the 7 Fed governor seats if he can get rid of Chairman Jerome Powell as well. Sorry, I'm starting to hit my tired face. That's the fiscal dominance stage that I think we're all going to. All roads are pointing to the same thing, that we're moving to this multipolar world order. And I think that's what the SCO thing was all about. And we're even starting to see America start to take more and more stakes in companies. So it needs Intel, try to rebuild a chip manufacturer. Howard Lutnick came in, said it wants shares in Fannie Mae. Is shifting towards the China model. This is the model where the government won't let these large corporations, or it takes the strategically important ones, And what is it? It's only the ones that are required for regional power. So the US Proof-of-Weapons Network wants to invest in a multipolar world order, but it wants America to have its own defense, which is shares in shares in Lockheed Martin. It wants to merge Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac so it can prop up the real estate market. And it wants semiconductor chip, which is the new resource that's needed as it turns America into a ginormous data center that needs to suck up lots of water while they tokenize, financialize, and securitize every single asset so that you have to compete with BlackRock for your resources. And more equity positions are being accumulated by the government as the rest of the assets are used to create the K-shaped economy that leads to civil unrest. And so I'm sorry that it's a bleak picture, but I want you to know the truth, because the only way to escape that is for you to own scarce assets, whether it's gold, whether it's Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin's a great equalizer because you don't need to hold it in custody. But if you do not own assets, your fiat currency will get completely treated like an ice cube, melted away. You'll never be able to get on the property ladder because the value of your fiat currency goes down while real estate is propped up by this proof of weapons network. And you need to decide, where you want to live, whether you want to stay and fight or whether you want to escape like many rich and wealthy. And that's everything that happened over the last 2 weeks in macroeconomics. So I hope you get a realistic picture of this. But once you have a realistic picture, then that's what you need in order to develop a plan. If we just say it's all good, and the good thing is even if this doesn't happen, even if I'm completely wrong, preparing for this is what's going to keep you ahead and make you one of those people that is able to escape this as well. So that's everything that I'm going to be covering this week in macro. Part 3 is going to be covering this week in geopolitics. And we're going to be going through the latest of what's happening. And I really want you to stay around for this one because I'm going to be analyzing the Gaza plan. And even if you don't care about what's happening in Gaza, I've been saying all along, you must care because we saw the plan. And the plan is, I think, essentially what they're going to be doing and trying to do on you as well. So we're going to be moving over to part 3. If you've enjoyed this, please do subscribe. I want as many people to be prepared. Hit the subscribe button, hit the bell symbol, hit all. Follow me over on X. I do live, I do spaces. I can answer your questions in real time. Follow me on Rumble. It's going to be the backup if YouTube takes me down. So we're streaming from there. Make sure you've got the Bitcoin Hard Talk podcast downloaded on Apple or Spotify. And head over to simondixon.com and make sure you've got a free membership to the Bitcoin Hard Talk membership portal where you can get your guide to self-custody and various other resources to manage this transition. That's everything for this week in macro. Part 2, the SCO and the Shanghai Proof-of-Weapons Network and everything that's happening as a result from the legacy Proof-of-Weapons Network. I'm going to take some water briefly, and we'll be back very shortly with part 3 this week in geopolitics. Welcome back to part 3 of Bitcoin Hard Talk, episode 96, the new Shanghai Proof-of-Weapons Network. In part 1, we discussed everything that happened this week in Bitcoin and the civil war that's happening in the Bitcoin space. In part 2, we recovered the SCO meeting, the Shanghai meeting, and the implications with the new Shanghai Proof-of-Weapons Network. And in part 3, I'm going to be analyzing the latest that is happening for this managed exit of the US Proof-of-Weapons Network from the Middle East, how that relates to what's happening with the Gaza genocide, and then the leaked plan from the Washington Post that outlined and confirmed everything we've been talking about in terms of the beta test of Gaza, take down Gaza, rebuild in a Build Back Better plan, and build the technocracy that they want to bring to the West and the rest of the world. So even if you don't normally watch the geopolitical section, please hang around. This is getting more and more relevant for you. And we created a summary that really explains it. And I'm going to point you to a blog that we've launched as well. We've actually created like a 5-part blog series because we put it all together so you can watch it bit by bit. I'll give you some more guidance as we get to that at the end on how you can access that blog series as well. Right, so this week in geopolitics. So the last couple of weeks that I'll be covering, the Gulf Cooperation Council, which is the bloc that is decolonizing away from America and Europe that colonized its region, is basically consolidating its position as the regional hegemon. And my belief is that by following the money, the GCC is trying to negotiate with the US Proof-of-Weapons Network a strategic exit, and the GCC is headed by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia that is really at the head of the negotiations. But it has its partners like Qatar, where it's doing the negotiations, and that funnels money to the various types of battles that are being fought in order to reset the world order through these covert operations and narrative control that's needed in order to be decolonized from the US Proof-of-Weapons Network. It's essentially negotiated, stop profiting from wars and destabilization, and instead will give you investment in the region and will be able to create much more money by your financial industrial complex co-investing with us. And eventually we want autonomy and control. And I know you want more control through joint investment agreements, but we want to remain sovereign because we got our sovereign wealth funds at the moment. In exchange for that, you get to take your military profits back over to you. You become a regional power, and may the best man win. And so that's what I think we're going through right now. So under that model, under the old model, military essentially served a purpose. And it also, the resistance movement of militancy, of funding resistance, which predominantly was done by Iran and Qatar, but was also done through these internal battles across the regions, and funding militants so that you don't engage in direct warfare. It served a purpose when the whole region was split up, which is what the British, the French, and the American Empire did. It tried to create divide and conquer across the region, and it fragmented the whole region into divide and conquer blocks, religious tensions, sectarian tensions, funded different groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda in order to create these Shia, Sunni, different types of battles. Then you had allegiances through Saudi Arabia that funded these different Wahhabi ideologies. And they would then be used by intelligence agencies in the West. Then you created the war on terror. You had CIA operations like 9/11. And Israel was essentially a part of the colony to steal money from the American taxpayer, money launder it through these wars, and then spend it back on US corporations to have this fake GDP and all the crony capitalism and trillions of dollars that was stolen from the American people and created this. And basically, these different types of groups made sense when there was a different convergence and people were arguing over territory. But now, thanks to China and thanks to competition to America, BRICS managed to normalize. GCC started to form its blocks. Iran started to form its blocks around its resistance. And China came along and normalized between Saudi Arabia and Iran and said, look what we can achieve together. We can expel the colonizers, and there is a new power in town. Let's align. Let's build a new vision. Let's de-dollarize, and let's shrink America to a regional power. And it worked. It's a dangerous operation. And it worked because America was vassalized into BlackRock. And so BlackRock was invested in these different regions. And so you have these regional battles to reset the world order. And so the GCC is essentially now fully aligned with BRICS and negotiating and aligned with the Proof of Weapons Network, and negotiated not through ideological alignment, but with practical alignment through normalization with Iran, because Iran is part of BRICS and part of the SCO that we covered in the macro section. And so at this stage, you have achieved your goal through militancy. And what happens? Militants become moving from an asset for regional power to a liability. And that's what I think we're witnessing right now. And so when militants block trade, and you want to move towards normalization, you have to go through a process of integrating those militants into actual armies and actual, regional vassalized powers or sovereign powers as well. Because what you want to do next is, if you are going to a region where the military is stopping the forever war model, you move towards energy investment. And the financial companies want to invest, and they don't want these different types of militants which destabilize the region and creates a bad investment. And so they need to go and be integrated so that you can isolate away from these different types of blocks. And so that's what I think we saw over the last 2 weeks, with an escalation into Yemen with the Houthis and the Houthis leadership. And normally when you had a targeted strike at the leadership, if it happens without any kind of regional chaos, regional destabilization, then this means that the significant powers are signed off on this being allowed to happen. And it's kind of like liability trimming. And so this is what I think we saw in the region. Hamas is essentially being pressured to integrate into the post-Gaza war governance framework that will be coming out with the Egypt and GCC plan. You're seeing in Syria that the PMF group, in Iraq, PMF, they started to create different types of laws to fold these different militia groups into these the state-controlled institutions. So you're seeing that happening more and more within Iraq. You're seeing in Syria that you had a reformed ISIS member that put on a suit and became the puppet government for the region that was funded by Turkey and the GCC. And so Syria is making more and more amends in order to integrate the SDF and the different types of militants into the region. Sometimes you have hardliners, and so you get these moments of violence, but in general, less and less violence, because that's being allowed to happen. Israel is basically intensifying its precision strikes on Hezbollah within Lebanon. There's lots of narratives around how to integrate, but it's coming after the hardliners. And rather than doing what it's always done when they're in the negotiation phase, which is just negotiate with death of civilians through its terrorist regime, it's actually specifically targeting, different types of hubs and leadership figures, rather than just going after civilians, as it still continues to do in Gaza as well. And so Israel is, I think, slowly, as it still continues this genocide. And I want to put things quite clear here. I've always made the distinction between my humanitarian self and my analysis based upon following the money. What is happening in Gaza is a humanitarian crisis, is a genocide, it's a starvation crime. But it's just the first time that we're seeing it on camera, because this has happened all along throughout the British Empire and American Empire and across the different region. But we're now seeing, I believe, the first signs of Israel shifting from just broad conflict and chaos for forever wars, and being more focused on liability elimination for the military-industrial complex exit. But obviously, military wants to make as much profit, sell as much bombs, drop as many bombs. So it's maximizing, pushing these negotiations to its limit. But I believe that it is eliminating liability for the Gulf Cooperation Council, BRICS now, and what the Proof of Weapons Network wants to rebuild in these AI data centers and everything it wants to rebuild in the region, as per Saudi Arabia's Project 2030 vision and various other things. So everything we're witnessing right now is, I believe, we're witnessing a transition from war optics to conflict, investment, and potential normalization. And so this is basically the approach that we're witnessing. It's disgusting, but this is how the Proof of Weapons Network works. You've just never been exposed to it in the West, as wasn't I until I started understanding from those in the region and those that can really analyze. And I combined it with my follow the money approach and some of the different analysis from Evan, who I'll point to in the blog as well, for those that want to follow those different types of approach. But basically, this type of approach, it redirects the region, and external audiences get to take the narrative that they want, but it sets up everything for the next stage of investment, where stability becomes basically the commodity, and it all replaces resistance and destabilization with stability. The Proof of Weapons Network basically wants war machine choke points to be controlled so they can create a stable environment for the rebuild and investment. You have different, it moves to negotiating reconstruction contracts, as sick as it sounds. What was this operation? It was using atrocities. Remember, go to the blog Atrocity Inc. on my blog on simondixon.com, where I showed all the false narratives from October the 7th. That becomes the false flag and the justification. It did happen. These things actually happen, but it wasn't anything like you were told. It was a hostage negotiation. There were hostages on both sides. The atrocities that you were told happened didn't happen. You can point to all the evidence if you haven't seen that on my blog. Look up, just put atrocity in the search field on simondixon.com blog. But now all of that was utilized in order to level everything, commit mass crimes against humanity. The US Proof of Weapons Network gets to profit from the whole thing. And then you look to stabilize the supply chains and rebuild so that you can finance the rebuild. And so the GCC, who's buying the exit, is co-investing with the BlackRock and the Proof of Weapons Network. BlackRock now sets up an office in Saudi Arabia. Members of Aramco aligned with Saudi Kingdom ends up on the board of BlackRock, and you get these different types of negotiations to buy away your freedom. And you get a substitute between these different types of models. The GCC now needs legitimacy because it's got its investors that wants to invest in this new region. They represent the bloc leadership. They negotiate the different types of normalizations with China and BRICS. And in exchange, the region gets isolations from sanctions, which is why the Iran nuclear deal was negotiated. And you get, pressure on the US from those that control the lobbies. And so then the government say, right, America, Trump administration, now you can remove those sanctions just like they did with Syria. And this is basically all orchestrated theater. And militancy is basically being converted into a structure that is governable through integration. And those that were funding the militias stop funding the militias now that they've got what they want. Because the whole point is that this moves towards a solution. The solution is never the ideal solution. But you're not the one that's being sacrificed. You're not the one that's going through the genocide at the moment. And you're not the one that knows what it's like to try and negotiate decolonization. And so we saw this in Syria. It's never satisfactory. But this is what I think is happening. And I think the analysis is following what I think is happening. When blocks like the GCC and BRICS basically converge, the proof of weapons network profit just needs to change the pipeline. It needs to change it, and it needs to look for another country to go for. That's why we're seeing the different countries that is testing its military operations. And it moves from, an asset to a liability, and it needs to find a new asset. And that's what we're seeing in Venezuela right now. So it moves to different types of stage conflicts. And then we now, rather than these stage conflicts, these precision targets in order to integrate and allow for a stable environment for investment. So Iran stopped funding the proxies, I believe. The 12-day war, I covered play by play. You can go back to that. I won't recover it here, but it gives everyone the narrative they need to move forward. If we end up in another one, it will be because there is staged agreements to get to the next stage, is my belief. And the GCC is the regional power, and Iran gets to keep its ideology and remain autonomous. But it agrees to stop funding resistance and move over to normalization. Netanyahu, basically, he's the operator of the US military industrial complex. He always was. He's basically the colony project was run by him. The money goes back to military companies in the US. US gets GDP. It perpetuates the demand for dollars, just like it does with the petrodollar. But his goal all along has been essentially to save, himself. And it wasn't about the Israeli state, because the Israeli state was going to be moving through this transition. People at the higher parts of the negotiation, but he wanted proof of weapons network immunity. So he progressed, he pushed this genocide for longer and longer and longer to have strategic negotiations, because the international court were going to throw him in crime for genocide. That would have created liability over to US corporations. And so he used that leverage and gave himself protection from legal, financial, and he's got himself institutional isolation, also from the internal corruption charges that were happening from the court and the judicial within Israel that led to the protests when Israel pre-October the 7th in the first place. And so it essentially means that he's negotiating his personal survival, and the proof of weapons network gets to isolate himself from being sued for the crimes against humanity. But it's not about Israel's survival. Israel is moving from a US colony to a GCC vassal. And that's going to be done one investment at a time, one asset at a time, and through the same types of tactics of the IMF, but this time through GCC. And so investments equals control. That was the IMF strategy. And you need to get rid of, basically, once you've got these different types of integrations, then you have the extreme Zionist ideology. Basically, the cabinet that's currently in charge, they get strategically weakened. We've already started to see this. This is where the US and Europe, or different factions of Europe, not US, who have been negotiating with Saudi Arabia and Qatar, they've been saying we're going to recognize Palestine. You started to see more and more embargoes, more and more sanctions. You even started to see the media change its narrative on Israel. So it started to tell the truth about people like Smotrich and Gavir that are funding Israeli terrorists and settlers to take out Palestinians, bulldoze their lands, and expand their settlements. Those people now move from liabilities. And so the media starts telling you the truth, and you start to see actual truth about what Smotrich and Gavir and the crimes against humanity that they're currently inflicting. Because all of that blocks GCC integration. You can't have an extreme Zionist cabinet And so the GCC gets to select their puppet government in Israel, which is the normal process. And it creates the optics, and you get to blame all the genocide and say it was those crazy extremists. And this is why you're seeing more and more of the algorithms in the technical industrial complex tell the truth about Israel. And so America gets to have the plausible deniability, say, no, it's because they blackmailed us. It was because, Jews rule the world and this Zionist thing. And, we've managed to break ourselves free, and they have the whole narrative. But you've also got to manage the Christian evangelical Zionists in America, which have been, they need to still believe that, it's a very complex operation that has to happen, but it needs legitimacy in order to, transition to these different types of blocks. And so as Israel basically shifts from a colony to a vassal, that will be done. And that's what I think we're seeing right now. Now, if you think that this is all conspiracy theory, the Washington Post released the plan, which was proposed by Tony Blair. And I'm going to give you a little AI summary, and I put together a long blog. I really want you to understand this. I know that we've covered a lot of content, but I want you to come back to this next week and watch the full blog, where I actually did a full breakdown on all the components of the plan, combined it with conspiracy theories that are becoming conspiracy facts, and then combined it with what's happening in the West so that you can see the beta test for what they want to do in Gaza, so that when it comes to you, it's no surprise as well. And basically, it needs to have this moderate, it's almost like the extremists are being replaced by moderates, and you get the blame shifting and all the different things we talk about. But at the same time, you get Israel being downgraded by the GCC into a dependency, with organizations downgrading their bonds, and this internal struggle that you're seeing within America as it holds on to the old narrative. And so America becomes completely isolated, loses some of its power structures like hosting UN and legitimacy and various other things. Israel becomes a pariah, and then you have the overthrow of the cabinet with quote unquote less extremist GCC puppets, and Netanyahu probably dismantles the cabinet and has negotiated not being sacrificed by the network as well. I don't imagine him to continue into politics beyond this election cycle. But media then starts amplifying different lies, different narratives, and you see these different types of things around Smotrich and Gavir and the extremists that they've been through. So what I want to do right now, before we go through the closing parts of what happened this week that kind of tie into my following the money and the broader theory of what's happening here, is I want to play an AI summary of what I believe the Proof-of-Weapons Network, representing US corporate stock market interest, has been negotiating via a tool of the POW, which is Tony Blair, who was a puppet government in the UK to push forward the Iraq War in reaction to the 9/11 and introduce the Terrorist Act and various other things. I want to go through the plan that he put forward to Trump. And I'm not saying this is going to be the final plan, but I want you to understand how they think in terms of what they want, because these are the same forces that are vassalizing Europe and America right now. And I want you to understand it. So it starts with the gaslighting announcement last time Netanyahu, I think it was 2 times ago, when Netanyahu visited the White House, as a reminder where Trump basically lays the narrative for what the plan was. And I think this plan was around that time, but we don't know the metadata. I tried to look at the metadata of the PDF, but it's all about controlling LNG flows, controlling different structures, and implementing a technocracy and a command and control structure that I said that they're trying to do with the UK operation at the moment. So what we'll do is we'll play the Trump and Netanyahu reminder. We'll go through the AI summary of my larger blog, and then we're going to come back and say how this ties in to everything that's happened this week in geopolitics, and point you to further resources where you can view the full blog, because I really want you to watch it and go deep into this so you can understand the level of psychopathy that these technocratic institutions are willing to go to. So Azad, do you want to play the final AI summary that we're going to be doing this week?
The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it, too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the site and get rid of the destroyed buildings, level it out, create an economic development that will supply unlimited numbers of jobs and housing for the people of the area.
Given what you've said about Gaza, did the U.S. send troops to help secure the security vacuum?
As far as Gaza is concerned, we'll do what is necessary. If it's necessary, we'll do that. We have an opportunity to do something that could be phenomenal. And I don't want to be cute. I don't want to be a wise guy, but the Riviera of the Middle East, this could be something that could be so bad. This could be so magnificent.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're getting into something really thought-provoking. It's Simon Dixon's research, specifically a blog post he wrote called Part 4, Endgame Gaza, the Beta Test for Global Control Systems.
Right, and that's part of his bigger series, Preparing Yourself in a World of Crypto, AI, and CBDCs.
Exactly. So our mission here is to unpack two, distinct narratives that Dixon suggests are actually deeply interconnected.
Okay.
First, there's this idea of an AI-generated blueprint for global control, and second, a very real-world strategic plan for reconstructing Gaza.
And Dixon connects that specific Gaza plan to figures like Tony Blair and Donald Trump.
Yeah, so we're looking at where these two things, the AI theory and the real-world plan, might overlap and, what that could mean for all of us.
Definitely. And Dixon's work introduces this concept. He calls it the Proof-of-Weapons Network.
Okay.
He describes it as this powerful, maybe stateless, global group operating sort of behind the scenes. And his core idea is that Gaza right now, it can be a beta test.
A beta test. For what?
For these global control systems. Systems that could potentially be rolled out elsewhere later on. We're just here to lay out the claims from Dixon's sources, present the connections he makes.
Right. No judgment from us, just presenting the information as found in the research. We want you, the listener, to think it through yourself.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's try and unpack this. Dixon mentions this proof-of-weapons network idea. Let's look at the sources he used. The first one was an AI conversation.
Yeah, an AI conversation that apparently outlined this pretty stark vision of global control, a kind of technocratic agenda to centralize power.
And it warned about specific things.
Oh, yes. Things like mandatory digital IDs, central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, mass surveillance, and these AI-driven smart cities.
Leading to what the AI called a digital prison. That sounds intense.
It does. The implication being total tracking and control, right?
Yeah.
Finance, movement, everything. The AI apparently even suggested that many crises are manufactured.
To justify these kinds of changes.
That was the claim. And also that world leaders are controlled. Pretty provocative stuff.
Okay, wow. So how does that very theoretical, almost sci-fi sounding AI warning connect to the real world?
Well, this is where Dixon draws the parallels to that great trust plan for Gaza.
Yeah.
It's actually quite striking when you put them side by side.
How so? Give me an example.
Okay, so the AI talked about national sovereignty fading in favor of global governance, right?
Yeah.
The Gaza plan proposes a U.S.-led multilateral custodianship. And crucially, it might retain plenary powers.
Plenary powers, meaning like absolute authority, even after local leaders are supposedly in place.
That's what plenary implies, yes.
Yeah.
It hints at a kind of managed order imposed from the outside.
Okay, that's a strong parallel on governance. What about the digital side? The AI warned about mandatory IDs.
It's incredibly direct in the Gaza plan. It explicitly says that within these new AI-powered smart cities, quote, all services and economy will be done through ID-based digital systems.
All services and the economy through a digital ID.
Seems so. And get this, the funding model involves land tokenization and a blockchain registry. So people might trade their physical land deeds for digital tokens representing future homes.
Tokenizing land. That sounds efficient, maybe, but also like a massive shift in controlling property, right? Centralizing it digitally.
It certainly centralizes the record of ownership and potentially the control framework around it. And remember, the AI's claim about crises being used as a pretext.
Yeah, that crises are manufactured or exploited to centralize power. How does the Gaza plan fit there?
Well, the plan literally emerges from the current conflict. Dixon points out that the plan frames the destruction in Gaza as the, quote, essential prerequisite for this huge transformation.
An essential prerequisite. That's a very deliberate way to put it.
It is. It frames the crisis not just as a tragedy, but as the necessary catalyst to remake Gaza from what the plan calls a demolished Iranian proxy into a prosperous Abrahamic ally.
Aligning it with the Abraham Accords vision, basically, using the crisis as the justification for a complete overhaul.
That seems to be the argument presented. And then there's the city design itself. The AI warned about smart cities as digital cages.
Right. How does the Gaza plan's urban vision look?
It calls for building AI-powered, smart-planned cities. But the key is why. The design's wide streets, specific layouts, are explicitly mentioned as ways to address the root causes of insurgency linked to, older, denser city layouts.
So, redesigning the city to make surveillance easier and insurgency harder, building control into the very streets.
That certainly seems like a possible interpretation of designing cities to address insurgency's root causes, linked to physical layout, easier monitoring, controlled movement. Now, one more connection.
Go on.
The AI conversation Dixon references apparently named Tony Blair as one of these supposedly controlled leaders.
Okay.
And Simon Dixon's blog directly attributes this very detailed, tech-heavy Gaza plan to Tony Blair and Donald Trump.
Wow. So that creates a direct, tangible link between the AI's broad claim and this specific real-world proposal attributed to the same person.
Exactly. It ties those threads together in a way that Dixon finds significant.
So, reflecting on all this, what does it mean for you listening? We've walked through two really detailed narratives here. And Dixon's research essentially asks us to consider if ideas once dismissed as maybe conspiracy theories are, becoming reality.
Yeah, with Gaza potentially being framed as this beta test site.
It raises some really big questions, doesn't it?
It really does. Like, in a world that's being shaped by these huge technology-driven plans, how do we actually tell the difference between genuine progress and, the potential for really unprecedented levels of control?
And how much privacy, how much autonomy are people willing to trade away for feeling secure or for convenience?
Where's that line? It's a critical question for everyone, I think.
Absolutely. We really encourage you to think about these points, keep asking tough questions, and definitely seek out more information from different perspectives.
They're curious.
Until next time, keep digging, keep questioning, and stay well informed.
Mr. President, how do you know that the Palestinians don't want to leave their land? Some people say this is ethnic cleansing. You won't be able to force them to leave their land. They stay
We're moving
there.
them to a beautiful location where they have new homes, where they can live safely, where they'll have
They won't
doctors
leave,
and
sir.
medical and all of those things. And I think it's going to be great. Yeah, any questions?
You said before that the U.S. would buy Gaza, and today you just said we're not going to buy Gaza.
We're not going to have to buy. We're going to have Gaza. We don't have to buy. There's nothing to buy. We will have Gaza.
What does that mean?
No reason to buy. There is nothing to buy. It's Gaza. It's a war-torn area. We're going to take it. We're going to hold it. We're going to cherish it.
And Mr. President, take it under what authority? It is sovereign territory.
Under the U.S. authority.
Wowzers. So if that doesn't make you want to bath and throw your phone at the screen, then I don't know what else would. And I don't think this is how it's going to work out. But this is what the US Proof-of-Weapons Network is negotiating, I believe, with the GCC in order to decolonize and replace the forever war demonic plan that has had for multiple decades, and replace it with profiting from stability. And let me just make this clear. In their twisted, effed up mind, They think a multi-decade struggle for land by the Palestinians, who were essentially invaded by the British colonizers and tried to put Israel on top of Palestine from 1917 because of a negotiation between the British government and Walt Rothschild. That after expansion and expansion and expansion, that the right way to settle that physical land structure on the home where Jesus and prophets walked, that the plan is just to take it out, take all the churches out, take all the mosques out, take all the hospitals, take out the universities, take out all the culture, and tokenize it into a shitcoin, NFT, and give it to the Gazans that haven't been massacred. That is how they think. And Trump was installed, and he's meant to be giving, and I bet you he will get it, the Nobel Peace Prize. And you think he works for the American people? He's controlled. Governments are subordinate to the Proof-of-Weapons Network, and the Proof-of-Weapons Network is as evil as it gets, and that's what backs up the dollar. The dollar is backed up by weapons, by force, by death, destruction, and the whole thing started with a genocide of the native population of America from the Europeans. And now you wonder why I think it's probably good to move to multipolarity. Because this British Empire stroke American Empire stroke transatlantic whatever is finally being weakened by gold. And we're able to protect ourselves with Bitcoin. And we're able to boycott the system and opt out while they rewrote all of our history and made us think that we weren't doing this all along. Because this has been the constant state of the forces that backed up the pound and backed up the dollar, that was created from the Bank of England to fund war, genocide, death, destruction, rape, pillaging, and just absolute carnage. What you are witnessing in Gaza and what it is taking to free itself from that force is exactly how the dollar works. And this is why sometimes when you see me on spaces getting highly frustrated with people saying we're the greatest country in the world, it's a little bit triggering for all the people that have been taken out by this dollar network. And so we have to re-educate ourselves. We have to learn the truth. And that's why I'm so passionate about coming to you each and every week at Bitcoin Hard Talk. And what I want to do is, I accept that it's a journey. I mean, it's taken me 25 years of following money to come to the understanding that I've come to. And even then, I'll get things wrong. It's still a team effort. I've been down many rabbit holes that don't take me in the right direction. But it's a community effort right now. And so if you see one little piece that you think would resonate with somebody, I try and create blog posts, and I'm trying to make it more condensed into things that may interest people. And so what I want to demonstrate to you right now is 5 different blog posts that are completely public, require no login, have short AI summaries, longer summaries, written, verbal, as well as different types of videos on the different parts that I think the journey people need to go through to understand what's happening today. Part 1 is just understanding the operation of immigration and the Muslim invasion. If you think people need to know so they don't get tricked, send them part 1. There's a link. Part 2 on the Jews rule the world conspiracy theory. If they subscribe to that, then there is definitely Jewish power, which is a faction of billionaires. There's only 10% of the billionaires, 90% of them aren't. And so send them that, and they can understand that these narratives are weaponized in order to create civil unrest. In part 3, I covered a summary of what artificial intelligence tells us the end game is. This is what they're saying exists. And so I compared that with my belief in the Proof-of-Weapons Network and created a very deliberate structure of what they're moving us towards. Part 4 is a summary of what they're doing in Gaza right now, a longer version plus a shorter version. So you can see what they're actually doing in Gaza so that you can see how they think about what they want to do with the rest of the world. And part 5 is anyone that wants to protect themselves with self-custody, how to do that. And I'll keep creating more and more content. Give me feedback below on what you want to see. And I'll keep covering Bitcoin Hard Talk every week. And I'll go through what happened this week that kind of reiterates where I might have got something wrong versus something that's going right now. And so all I want to do is go through the final bits. I know I've gone over slightly, but the final bits of what happened this week in geopolitics that reiterate my understanding, and then we'll close up for the week as well. And please give me feedback in the comments and share of what you'd like to see, what questions you have. I want to create as many resources as possible because I really think we are walking into this Bitcoin AI and CBDC world and stablecoin world. And people are really not taking seriously what's going to happen. And so as we move to this transition and GCC negotiation and this demonic plan, we started to see the GCC fight back against the Proof-of-Weapons Network. Maybe these are negotiations as well. Maybe this is part of the strategic transition. So the UAE, which is highly aligned, already normalized with Israel, strategically aligned with America, but part of the GCC as well, probably the one that has the most, given the most power to the West in terms of some of their moves, even using some of the Proof-of-Weapons Network atrocities in Sudan at the moment in order to control various factions of the North African roots. They warned Israel. Normally they wouldn't do this. It's the strongest warning we've seen from them. It's happening for a reason. They said, if you annex the West Bank, that is their red line. That is the end of the Abraham Accords. That is the end of the normalization agreement. In terms of Israel, in order to show the extremists like Gavir and Smotrich, they publicly released their announcement that they said that they're going to take 21 different routes and they're going to expand illegal settlements in the West Bank. And that was met with 21 different countries, including the UK, France, that issued a joint statement saying that they condemn Israel's approval of any new settlement projections and any new projects within the West Bank to terrorize Palestinians. And it was a project that Smotrich and Gavir announced called E1. You know, this is, I think, designed to show them as the extremists that they are, and this made it to the Western media. They called the decision basically completely unacceptable, a flagrant breach of international law, a threat to the two-state solution. And these things have always happened, but now they're telling them to you because we're moving to that next phase, because maybe they found a plan that they're willing to agree with. And hopefully it doesn't involve giving the Palestinians a shitcoin NFT in exchange for their physical land and bribing them to leave the land. But there were different signatories to the statement, and it included Australia, Canada, Italy. And suddenly we're told that these people just recognize the genocide, the starvation, the famine. No, they're all puppet governments. And if you think it's a conspiracy theory, it's obvious that it's a conspiracy fact at this stage. The Proof-of-Weapons Network selects. You don't elect. Your vote is meaningless. And they create a theater to distract you with saying communism is the enemy, or China is the enemy, or Russia is the enemy, or the Democrats are the enemy, or the Republicans are the enemy, or the Labours, or the Conservative, or the Reform, or Nigel Farage, or the immigrants. It's always manufacturing an enemy to make sure you never know who controls the shot as well. We had an announcement from Turkey that is banning any ships that go to Israel, any ties with economic activity with Israel. It says that it's suspending all trade. You know, I think the oil will still flow, which is the major thing, but, you know, we'll see. We had an announcement from France. You know, I'm not buying, I don't know what these negotiations actually are. I'm just trying to follow the money and put it together with the information that we have and consolidate that with other analysts that I respect as well. But France said that it is planning to open an embassy in the West Bank in order to actually be located in the West Bank. This is after they recognized Palestine as a state on the 22nd of September. And so there will also be a Palestinian embassy in France. More and more countries said that they're going to do this on the 22nd of September. It's likely only to be left with someone maybe Hungary and America as the last states in the world that don't recognize. Complete isolationism. And this is only happening because the Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the GCC have been negotiating, and because there was the normalization deal with China between Iran and Saudi Arabia, in my opinion. And they've been applying their leverage in order to get to this point. Now, what's interesting, when all these countries said that they're going to recognize Palestine at the United Nations, how did the US react? They decided to remove the visa for the Palestinian representative of the United Nations. This means that the US is no longer able to host the United Nations because it's never been independent. But the promise is of United Nations that you always allow the representative to enter your country. This means that US has lost the right to be an impartial host of the United Nations. That is what makes a world hegemon. That is what makes the global leader. And where are these negotiations happening? They're happening at the SCO meetings as well. So US can no longer call itself the trusted host of the United Nations. To me, that represents the symbolic genocide that's being paid for with US taxpayers' money, that is now the country that cannot be trusted to host the United Nations. This marks the type of symbolic element, the type of symbolic gesture that leads to the fall of an empire. And as I said, it started with a genocide by the Europeans, and I think it's going to be slowly deconstructed with the genocide of the Palestinians. And it never stopped doing it all the way along. And it made us think that something completely different was happening. And so we need to rewrite history. We just need to be honest. And we can only defeat the Proof-of-Weapons Network with truth. And without truth, there can be no peace, because then you're going to be distracted with politicians believing that that's the solution. The real solution is that we recognize who power is, where power lies, and we commit to truth, and we boycott, we educate, we divest, and we put pressure to sanction. And that's why I'm passionate about boycotting the Federal Reserve by owning your money outside the system. That can be done with gold or Bitcoin. Once you do that, it's been given the reward of beating other asset classes, which allows you to escape the system in terms of the inflationary impact historically. Can't give financial advice. But when you boycott it, you don't do it and hold it with BlackRock, because you don't want them to have the power so that they have the negotiation chip of Bitcoin in the currency war. You want yourself to have it. And once you have it, you don't want to give the bank more power by custodying it with them and borrowing against it with fiat currency. And when you keep it where you can hold it and you can spend it in self-custody, you're able to direct the flow of capital, and you can decide where you're going to take your spending money or stable coins or wherever it goes. And you can direct it into supporting your community. And you can invest in decentralized solutions rather than giving your money to BlackRock where it invests it all for you. That's how we fight back. That's the struggle. That's the resistance. So always remember, you are alive at one of the most interesting and exciting times in financial history. Most are going to get wrecked. Others are going to do really well. I want you to be on the right side of the change and share my content with anyone that you would also like to understand this information and get on the right side of this change. We want to do it with peace, love, and unity. I do believe that Bitcoin is the peaceful resistance. And I'd like to build a community of as many people that are doing the same, owning more Bitcoin every month, regardless of the price, learning self-custody, deciding to make Bitcoin stronger by running nodes, and going through that journey together, because that's what you need for decentralized identity, decentralized artificial intelligence, decentralized social networks, decentralized money. That's how we win. We're not going to take down the whole network, but we can create a larger portion of people that are able to influence the network until eventually we can afford, through wealth, a position that I've been blessed to be put in, where you can buy the lobbies if you want. You can influence politics because they only listen not by your vote, by the vote of your money, because in the West, they are all prostitutes and you can buy them through lobby. And that's the only way to engage in politics, or you exit, or you recognize where real power lies and you don't waste your time with wrong power. What I'd like you to do is, if you enjoyed this content and you're not a subscriber already, please subscribe, hit the bell symbol, hit all. Please do follow me on Rumble in case I get taken off YouTube. Please do subscribe to the podcast on Apple and Spotify, Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And please do get your guide to self-custody by going to simondixon.com and getting your username and login. And if you want the free content, head over to the blog and you can look for that part 1. The part 4 we're going to be constructing next week, so it will be available from next week, because I want you to see what's happening in Gaza and how it relates to what they might want to do for you. It was always a beta test, and we are at a very, very interesting time. So that's going to be everything for Bitcoin Hard Talk, episode 96. The new Shanghai Proof-of-Weapons Network, so that we can enter into competing interests rather than the atrocities of the global hegemon. I'll see you for episode 97 next week. Peace.